I'd like to call to order the regular meeting of the Fairfax Town Council. It's 7 o'clock on Wednesday, October 2nd, 2019. We're at the Fairfax Women's Club, 46 Park Road. And with that, let's do the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Town Clerk, would you like to do our roll call, please?
Yes, Madam Mayor. Councilmember Lax.
Here.
Vice Mayor Goddard. Here. Councilmember Reed.
Here.
Councilmember Ackerman.
Here.
And Mayor Kohler.
Here. And I'd like a motion for approval of the agenda and affidavit of
So
posting.
moved. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Hi. And Mayor, if I may, we did have a meeting in closed session.
Yeah,
to
I'm
report.
going to report out on that now. Thank you. So we had a closed session, and there's nothing specific to report out on that. So with that, we will start with the meeting protocol. The mayor shall maintain order at the meetings. The council and the audience are expected to refrain from using profane language and or ridiculing the character or motives of council members, staff, or members of the public, and to maintain the standards of tolerance and civility. Please turn off all cellular phones or place them in the silent mode. The town council will review the agenda at 10 p.m. to ascertain which items, if any, will be continued to another meeting. Any matter not started by 11:30 p.m. will be continued to an adjourned or regular council meeting unless the council votes to suspend this rule. Well, we're starting out with presentations.
Madam Mayor,
Yes?
just as clarification, did you do the roll call and approval of agenda?
Yes?
Oh, okay. So you,
We did all that.
well, I guess I missed it. I was going to report on the approval of the agenda, the one thing that's not on the agenda.
Okay, that would be great. Thank you.
Okay, so I apologize. Just wanted to let people know that last month we talked about the EIR for Miranda Heights being on this evening's agenda. We actually have rescheduled it to November. Part of that was at the applicant's request. They had a series of questions regarding clarification as to the scope of work, and they indicated they would get it to us in writing so we could respond, and that's why it's not going to be on until the November meeting.
So they did raise some legal issues?
They just raised more questions of clarification of the scope of work. I think most of it is if they were going to be responsible for paying the $650,000 plus everything else, that they just wanted to make sure they understood exactly what they're paying for.
Okay, thank you. All right, so with that, we are going to start with presentations. And the first is a proclamation in honor of Rose Tabor of former Rainbow Fabrics, so I'll come down. So Rose, would you mind coming up, or is that going to be okay? Okay, great. I do want to say I've been wanting to do this since January, and Rose has been very busy, and we're so honored that she's here tonight. Town of Fairfax proclamation honoring Rose Tabor of Rainbow Fabrics. Whereas Rose Tabor has been a Fairfax resident since 1965, when she and her husband Ed moved here with their growing family. And whereas after 40 wonderful years, Rose has closed the doors of Rainbow Fabrics, which she opened in 1978. And whereas the store became a staple of the downtown scene, the destination for young and old creative spirits. And whereas over the years, Rainbow Fabrics has provided our community with classes and plenty of creative material. And whereas Rose, through her store and her generosity, became a central thread in the fabric of our community, fostering nearly 30 children in her home together with her husband. And whereas Rose also started Rainbow Kids, a nonprofit that raised money and collected gifts and food for children in need. And whereas the town council presented Rose the Citizen of the Year award in 1996 in recognition of her contributions to the community, and whereas Rainbow Fabrics will be dearly missed by everyone who ever decided to step through its doors and linger in a world of colors and textures and craft supplies, imagining the possibilities, and now, therefore, be it proclaimed by the Town Council of the Town of Fairfax in acknowledgement of her contributions to the town and to the community, the Town of Fairfax extends its gratitude and appreciation to Rose Tabor and Rainbow Fabrics and wishes her happiness in her retirement. Thank you. So Rose would like to say a few words.
I had to write them down because
Okay.
as big mouth as I am, I can't remember anything.
Okay.
Mayor Kohler, city council members, and distinguished guests, I am truly honored. I'm going to cry.
It's all right.
And touched to be recipient of this proclamation. No one enters into a career, a profession, trade, or journey as a merchant with the thought of such recognition when the time comes for transition. Yet it is always nice to be recognized. My shop was always a project of love. My customers, most of whom became my friends, and everyone just made it such a joy. We started Rainbow Kids shortly after we bought the store, and that alone kept me going for much of my time in business. There was a need for help, and I love helping others. I want to especially thank Ed, my husband. He couldn't come this evening, for always just knowing how important Rainbow Fabrics was to me. I think I spent more time with Rainbow Fabrics than I did my husband. I think he was thankful for that. He was always there for total support. 40 years has come and gone so fast, 43 years actually, but it is time for new challenges and maybe a bit of relaxation, a bit. Thank you so much for the recognition, and I am grateful for your kindness. Fairfax has always been good to us. Thank you.
Can we take a picture? I got you. Thank you, Mom.
Thank you,
I'll
Barbara.
walk you to your seat.
Oh, no, I got
I'll hand you this.
Okay.
Okay. Did anyone else want to say something?
No, I just want to present Rose
So along with, is this working? Yeah. Okay. Along with me wanting to honor Rose for many, many months and finally getting to do that, one of the things I wanted to bring back was Citizen of the Year. And the plaque for Citizen of the Year is over there on the wall. And the last time a Citizen of the Year was named in Fairfax was 1997. So it's time. And because it's been so much time, we are honored to name 2 people Citizens of the Year, and I think we could have even done more, but we did finally have to make a decision. So our first is, David, would you like to come up? The Town of Fairfax proclamation in honor of David Smadback, the 2019 Citizen of the Year. Whereas David Smadback has been a dedicated and hardworking community member throughout his many years of volunteer service for the town of Fairfax. Whereas David takes initiative and makes things happen throughout the town with his unique ability to connect and coordinate with other community members and agencies to complete communal efforts. And whereas Fairfax residents now have the Gymnastics Party program, where community members can book sessions with the Flying Dutchman gymnastics coaches, and provides residents the opportunity to enjoy the pavilion's facilities while their children participate in the fun, all thanks to David's advocation and meticulous work behind the scenes. Whereas David has donated a tremendous number of hours to the town of Fairfax by attending numerous town meetings, offering feedback, positive solutions for local issues, and lending a hand to anyone in need. And whereas although David has always had a busy schedule, including being a well-established and award-winning local real estate agent, David served on the Fairfax Parks and Recreation Commission, and the Chamber of Commerce, now serving as its executive director. And whereas David aids in the process of seeking sponsorships for the Fairfax Recreation Department's events, and also includes entertainment activities for children during holiday celebrations hosted by the town, including face painting during the egg hunt. And these are long, so get ready. Whereas through his many hours of dedicated service to the town, David has organized and overseen the town of Fairfax's Halloween parade for the chamber. And whereas David also created and developed the annual Irish Festival, and he has also led efforts on the annual Brewfest. And whereas likewise, David volunteers his free time and is an instrumental part of the team in charge of hosting the Fairfax Townwide Picnic by coordinating popular attractions for children. And whereas David works mainly behind the scenes and has yet to be recognized for his many efforts, it is now time for the town of Fairfax to officially recognize David Smadback for his community service, for which he expects nothing in return. And whereas David is humble with a quiet, unassuming approach which belies his many accomplishments and his ability to get things done. And whereas David has a huge heart and providing service is his way of life, the town of Fairfax is truly a better place because of David Smadback. I'm going to cry. Whereas David has worked unceasingly and selflessly for the community of Fairfax and beyond for many years, too numerous to count, and now therefore be it hereby proclaimed in acknowledgement of his enthusiastic leadership, kindness, and tireless efforts for Fairfax and the larger community, the Town Council of the Town of Fairfax extends its gratitude, appreciation, and admiration to David Smadback, the 2019 Citizen of the Year recipient. And be it further proclaimed that October 2nd, 2019 is David Smadback Day in the town of Fairfax.
What do you say after something like that? I'm just glad my wife read it to me last night, because otherwise I'd be a blubbering mass up here. I'll just say a couple things. I came to Fairfax 20 years ago and fell in love with my wife, Iseult, and the town of Fairfax all in one go. It was a one-night stand that's going to this day. But, I now, this year, I've officially lived longer in Fairfax than any place in my life. So this is my home. And I've made such great friends. This is my tribe, my community. And there's so many people to thank. And I'm not going to name them all, but thank you very much. It means a lot.
Okay, so we've got another one. Jody, would you come up? What's funny is both of these folks are so humble. I think Jody's response was, oh no. And I think David had something similar when I talked to him. So it's nice to have so many folks like this in our town. So this is another long one. Get ready. Okay, Town of Fairfax proclamation in honor of Jody Timms, the 2019 Citizen of the Year. Whereas for approximately 10 years, Jody Timms has been the town of Fairfax's appointed representative to the Marin County Commission on Aging, where she is a tireless advocate for older adults in Fairfax and throughout the county. And whereas through Jody's leadership, the town of Fairfax submitted its age-friendly designation application to the World Health Organization in December 2014 and was accepted into the global network of age-friendly cities on March 1st, 2015. And in 2018 was notified of its membership into AARP's age-friendly network. And without Jody Timms, there would be no age-friendly Fairfax. In 2014, Jody organized a group of volunteers, the Age-Friendly Task Force, of which I'm one. And from 2015 to 2016, the task force developed the Age-Friendly Fairfax Community Assessment and Strategic Action Plan, submitted it to WHO in 2017, and began its implementation. Whereas as chair of Fairfax's Age-Friendly Task Force, Jody has led the groups tirelessly and selflessly to implement the plan for Fairfax, and at this time, more than 90% of its goals have been accomplished. Many elements she has personally created and led, such as creation of a monthly forum at the library on topics for older adults. She holds one-on-one sessions, Ask the Expert for older adults, and worked with the Fairfax Recreation Department and the Town Council to provide free classes for older adults. And whereas Jody initiated the concept of age-friendly benches throughout the town of Fairfax, many have been placed along Center Boulevard, outside the Women's Club, which facilitates Marin Transit pickup, and in Bolinas Park, along with other locations in town. Whereas Jody developed the Breakfast with Friends monthly gatherings in local Fairfax restaurants to encourage older adults to engage with others as a means to combat solitude and loneliness often seen with seniors. And whereas Jody encouraged the task force to develop and work with the Ross Valley seniors to host an annual 90 and Better event to celebrate non-agenarians in the town of Fairfax. The second celebration will be held October 10th, 2019. And whereas Jody created partnerships with the Fairfax Library and Bennett House to ensure the work with older adults has a broader reach. Through her efforts, the library and Bennett House have chair yoga classes along with other programs. Whereas Jody's leadership role within the community includes working collaboratively with the town council and local community members to redesign, reinvigorate, and refurbish the park within Klaus Circle. And whereas Jody created 350 Marin with her son Jolan to raise awareness around global climate issues and has been an integral member of the Fairfax Climate Action Committee since its inception in 2014. Whereas as a founding member of Cascade Canyon Firewise Committee, the first established in town, Jody has motivated neighbors to create defensible space around their homes, to develop evacuation plans, to create go bags, and has led efforts to assist the most vulnerable residents in her neighborhood. And whereas Jody is described by her fellow community members as being a leader, an uplifting team player who makes the experience of getting involved enjoyable, Jody is known as a vital part of the community. She takes the initiative and always steps up. Whereas Jody truly lives to make our town and our world better in numerous ways, the town of Fairfax is truly a better place because of Jody Timms. And now, therefore, be it hereby proclaimed in acknowledgement of her leadership, commitment, and tremendous service to Fairfax and to the larger community, the Town Council of the town of Fairfax extends its gratitude, appreciation, and admiration to Jody Timms, oh God, I'm going to cry, the 29th Citizen of the Year recipient. And be it further proclaimed that October 2nd, 2019 is Jody Timms Day in the town of Fairfax, which you have to share with David.
Okay. I will. Thank you very much, Council. I can think of a million people who deserve this award really much more than I do. But I do want to deeply appreciate the fact that you've given me this. To me, it really acknowledges the efforts that I'm really committed to in supporting particularly those of trying to create a more connected and respectful community in Fairfax and in the world, a place really where people care more about each other and people of all ages, all abilities, all colors, all points of view. I think a place where really we all care also much more about the planet and the earth itself, our world. This is a beautiful, incredibly beautiful place that we're so blessed to call home. And you know, if you know me, you know I kind of really do hope to see radical change in the infrastructure of our individual and collective lives. I think a lot of change is coming. But we certainly need more humanity and we need more solidarity. And what better place to thrive, imagine, and create than here in Fairfax. So thank you very much, all of you.
So actually, we were going to take a little break for some cookies or just come up. Hannah will put them at the edge of the table. I think the town council can keep working, but you all just help yourself to some cookies. So just want to point out that we will be, I'm not sure, Hannah, is the plaque, does it already have their names? Oh, so the Citizen of the Year plaque, which is over near Silver Clark. Yes, Silver, wave your hand. Now has Jody Timms and David Smadback. So I'm hoping that this continues every year because we have so many wonderful people in this town that care so much. So it's a simple thing we can do. What? Get a bigger plaque. Oh, there's plenty of room on that plaque. So anyway, we'll move on. And we have, we're doing a couple of interviews for appointments to a couple of boards in town. And usually we do those before the meeting, but one of our applicants was not able to get here until after 7. So usually we make someone sit up in front of us with a chair. We're not going to do that. We're going to make them stand at the dais.
No, at the podium.
Podium. Yeah, we're at the dais. Thank you, Rose. Glad you could make it.
Bye.
She does. That's what happens when you retire. Okay, so our first applicant is for the volunteer board, and that is Wolf Barnato. Wolf, would you mind coming up to the podium? We're going to make this shorter.
Yeah,
Only one question.
Hello.
Okay, and I see we have Tinkerbell.
Yep.
Very
Yes.
good. So it's nice to see you, Wolf.
Good
Wolf
to
and
see
I
you.
talked about him participating in town events many months ago, and I know he's been going to the volunteer board. So the first thing we do, and for those of you talking in the back, it would be great if you would take that outside, just because this is a little nerve-wracking for some folks. So first, what we're going to do, the process will be that you'll give a couple of minutes on why you're interested in being part of the volunteer board, and then we'll have one member of the council ask you a question, and then you can respond to that, and then we'll make a decision. So with that, if you want to get started on why you would like to be part of the volunteer board.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of this town. I love this town. I own a business in town, and I've never really been a part of a community as much as I've been in this town so far. Just seeing this, and I've come to some of these meetings now, and just watching how everything works is interesting to me. I don't know how it works in other places, but it seems like a special place. I plan to be here for my whole life. I love Fairfax very much. I've been here for 6 years, and I've had the business for a little over 3 years. And the whole process interests me. Seeing those people that spoke before me it's a beautiful thing to me. It makes me happy to see people like that that care about where they live and making a difference, being a part of something more than just their day-to-day life. I would have wrote something if I knew I had to explain, but that's I think that's about it.
That's okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. That's great. And we know that Wolf has attended at least one meeting, and I believe he's attended more than that.
A few, yeah, I think 2 or 3, yeah.
Great. So we're only going to do one question because, okay, you can ask the question, Renee.
First of all, thank you so much for stepping up. It's great to see you and your, is that Tinkerbell?
Tinkerbell,
Is that
yeah.
really? So the Fairfax volunteers are involved in creating a lot of events for the town.
Yes.
If you could create any event of your dreams and bring it to Fairfax, what would it be? Sorry, I know that's
No,
really
no,
big. It
that's-
doesn't have to
that's
be of your
cool.
dreams,
That's a
but
cool
what would you
answer.
like to see happen in Fairfax?
Personally, event-wise, I'm not sure, but I know there's so many people in this community. It's such an active community, young people, young parents, things like that. I'd love to see things like, a skateboard park or, I know they're talking about having a pump track. I know it's a small place and things like that, but I think that kind of stuff's amazing. I think that recreation is really important for people around here. So if I could have anything to eventually down the road one day, I know it's way bigger than anything I'm in the realm of doing right now, but I think that kind of stuff's cool. Even to have a pull-up bar, a workout station, if I could help make something cool that would change one person's day in the community, that's nice to me. I like that. Yeah.
Great. Thank you, Wolf.
Cool.
So would any members of the public like to speak for Wolf and Jesse Hoffman? Come on down. And I think Gio Taylor would probably like to. It would be great as the chair if you would. So, Wolf, you can sit down for right now.
Hi, I'm Jesse Hoffman. I'm the vice chair of the Fairfax Volunteer Board. And I just wanted to say that Wolf has some great ideas. We loved his participation in the meetings, and we really hope that you vote to put him on the board.
Okay, great. Thanks. George, would you like to come up as chair? That we would love to hear from you.
It may not be I'm George Taylor. I'm chair of the volunteer board right now. It may not be apparent to everybody, but Wolf is a lot younger than most of the people here. And he's in a demographic that is really exciting because of his knowledge of local people, local younger people. So that's really one of the exciting things about the volunteer board, being able to extend to a broader reach of people. And I just wanted to put a plug in for the board while I'm here. We are really a conduit for you to have cool, great ideas about Fairfax. And so Maria Baird is our contact at Town Hall, and you can find us rather readily. We're at most of the coffee shops, as Wolf attested. So we're available to help create cool things for Fairfax, and including, like Wolf was just mentioning, health, and also arts, creative arts, health and safety, Firewise committees, and all of our local annual events. So we're interested in having you help us create more events for Fairfax. So it was a great question, Renee.
Okay.
Thank you all.
Thank you, George.
Okay.
Okay, so bringing it back to the council, would somebody like to make a motion?
I'll move approval of Wolf to be our next volunteer board member.
Great, thank
I
you.
heartily second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? That motion carries. Thank you, Wolf, for stepping up. Congratulations. Okay, we were going to do an interview for an applicant for the tree committee, but I don't believe I see Ted Pugh here. Did he confirm that he was going to be here?
He did. I'm not sure if something came up. I'll contact him.
Well, we can start the meeting, and if need be, maybe we'll have a motion to try to fit him in during the meeting if he shows up. But otherwise, we'll have to reschedule.
Okay, sounds
I'll
good.
move continuing this until later in the meeting.
Okay.
Is appropriate.
Second? Someone want to second that?
I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Seeing none, that motion passes. Okay. Well, we'll move on to announcements. Vacancies on boards and commissions. We have up to 2 vacancies on the Applications are available at Town Hall and on the town website. For more information, contact the Deputy Town Clerk or visit www.townoffairfax.org. We have up to 2 vacancies on the Climate Action Committee. The Open Space Committee has 2 vacancies. The Tree Committee currently has 1 vacancy. Parks and Recreation Commission has 1 vacancy. The Volunteer Board has an alternate vacancy. I didn't realize they had that. The Fairfax Food Pantry is Saturdays 9 to 11 a.m. The Fairfax Community Church, 2398 Sir Francis Drake Boulevard. Volunteers are needed. I will tell you that volunteers are always needed, but more so as they shut down 10:30 to 11 or so. So everybody's welcome to volunteer, but if you can come later, that would be pretty helpful. Anybody you know who needs food, or if you need food, feel free to go to the food pantry. You don't show ID. You don't have to defend why you need food. Just show up. And I know our food pantry has been rated kind of the best of all the food pantries in Marin. Speak Cheesy, Friday, October 11th, 7 through 8:30 p.m. at the Fairfax Women's Club. $30 adults, 21 and up only. And you'll see the signboards around town. Perry Park Cleanup, Saturday, October 26th, 10 through 12 noon, all ages welcome. Another event that isn't for everyone is the non-agenarian event on October 10th. I believe it's 2:30 to 5, and that'll be at Bennett House? Oh, here, thank you, I forgot. And if you know anybody who's 90 or older and they have not been invited, please tell them to come down. It'd be nice if they could RSVP to our town, Maria Baird, but if they aren't able to do that, we'll make room. This isn't open to all folks because it's a lunch and a little celebration for our non-agenarians. So with that, I'd like to move on to open time for public. Oh, you have something. I'm sorry, I didn't see you.
So a very exciting weekend is coming up, and it's the weekend of the 12th and 13th of October. On the 12th, you may know that Biketoberfest is taking place. It's a big fundraiser for the Marin County Bicycle Coalition. On the evening of the 12th, at the ball field, we will be screening. This is co-sponsored by Fairfax Recreation, Sustainable Fairfax, and Safe Routes to Schools, and we'll be showing the film Motherlode. It's made by a local filmmaker. It's winning awards. It's in film festivals all over the world right now. And it's a wonderful film about Fairfax and the cargo biking movement, which is the way that many, many folks are transporting their children to school at this point, saving us a lot of congestion and a lot of greenhouse gas pollution. On the 13th is Streets for People. Streets for People is an 8-year-old event. It took a break last year. It's back. The road, Bolinas Road, will be closed to cars between 10 a.m. and 4 p.m. on Sunday the 13th to celebrate Fairfax, to get everybody downtown, youth music festival, clothing swap, trash and show, artists and young musicians, and everybody is welcome. This is a chance to bring everybody out into the streets and support our local businesses and get to know one another. So very fun weekend approaching.
Okay, anyone else have any announcements? Seeing none, bring it back for open time for public expression. To address the council on matters not on the agenda, please approach the podium and state your name and address, which are optional. Depending on the number of speakers, individuals have 2 to 3 minutes to speak, 4 to 5 minutes if representing a group. The council is not permitted to take action, and state law strictly limits the right of the council to discuss any unagendized item unless it can be demonstrated to be of an emergency nature or the need to take immediate action arose after the posting of the agenda. So with that, Tom, would you like to speak?
Yeah, hi, Tom O'Neill, Domingue Avenue, Fairfax, California. And just to reiterate what a great town we have here. And the only jewelry I wear on my neck is held in place by cordage bought at Rainbow Fabric. And I've been going to that store up until they closed for so long to buy needles, thread, cordage, fabric. You know, I used to, well, they had a great table out in front with items that you could purchase per whatever amount you wanted to pay, and that money would go to Rainbow Kids, which is, you know, I can't say enough about what this town has done, you know, for its citizens in respect to those proclamation things. And David Smadback, and I know, unfortunately, I don't know the aging lady, but, you know, I probably should. I'm 65 now, so. And, just an add-on to the food pantry. Sometimes they open a little early if you're interested in the food pantry. I try to get there by 8:15 myself. And it is a great pantry, and you know, I'd like to say that Larry Bragman and his wife are very instrumental in that, and their service to the community is pretty big. And other than all that stuff, I guess I just want to say that I'm still a school crossing guard, and my view on how individuals are conducting themselves while they are driving motor vehicles has not really changed for the better over the years. And I just want to say that children are not paying attention to their surroundings. You know, it's not their job. They're kids. You know, they've got to be kids. You know, and the deal is that if you're a driver and you're out on the road in the morning when children are on their way to school, or if you're on the road in the afternoon when children are on their way from school to go back home, you know, pay a little more attention to what you're doing, because it's important that everybody stop behind the sidewalk, behind the crosswalk, not on it and blocking it, and not blocking the intersection. And everybody have a little more patience and understanding for everybody concerned, especially, you know, not just for pedestrians and kids, but for other drivers too. Everybody's got a single track mindset, and that's their destination and how fast they can get there, it seems. But other than that, I love this town so much, and I'm so grateful to everybody here.
Thank you, Tom.
And the distinguished visitors too.
Thank you.
Thanks very much. Good night, guys.
The aging lady, I like that. So good evening, Council. Jody Timms, Cascade Drive. My monthly check-in with you about the Commission on Aging. Our next meeting is actually tomorrow, and it's at the Marin City Senior Center. It's a very important topic. It's on the Census 2020. Older adults are at risk of being undercounted, as well as a number of other populations, including low-income folks and people of color. Canal Alliance, you may know, has been given a grant this year to support outreach to typically undercounted populations. And Stephanie, their advocacy and policy manager, will be the speaker tomorrow at 10 a.m. So they have more information on the website if you're interested. Next year's census, as I understand it, is going to be digital. So that's especially a challenge for some folks. And given that federal assistance, among other things, is tied to that count, it's going to be really important for all of us to learn what needs to happen and how to support an accurate count for Marin County. Also just want to mention the United Nations has declared 2020 to 2030 the decade of aging. So there'll be global initiatives, more things I think in support of the trending demographics toward older adults. And also the commission meeting in December will be on the California Master Plan for Aging, which Governor Newsom has been working with the whole group on. So we're really excited about that as well. The age-friendly forum this month is on Medicare. This is the open enrollment period, so for folks who are on Medicare or will be on Medicare in this next year, you might want to come check out Plan D options and other important information about Medicare that would be helpful for you to know about. It's at the library from 1 to 2, always on the second Friday on October 11th. The library actually is continuing occasionally to schedule a fourth Friday forum. So they had one last month, and in October they will have one on Age Well and Drive Smart. So that's a really important course on safe driving. That's on the 25th from 1 to 2. And the October 3rd, tomorrow, again, Ross Valley Seniors is in the morning. At 11 till 2, that's the luncheon, and also John Martini is going to be talking about San Francisco's Forgotten Fair in 1984. Breakfast with Friends is October 16th, and of course we have all of our regular classes, and there's a flyer in the back. And if I could just very briefly change hats for a minute and give a quick update on the Climate Action Committee. I think probably many of us were deeply inspired 2 weeks ago by the 7.6 million people around the world who participated in the global climate strike. Greta Thunberg, many of us, I'm sure, saw her in front of the United Nations. Extremely powerful words that young woman has. And in that context, the Climate Action Committee is updating our climate action plan. We have a little committee that's doing that, and we're trying to line up the initiatives and the actions in there to be in alignment with the climate emergency that the town council passed in this early spring, which is for 0 greenhouse gas emissions by 2030. That's a really radical effort, but right along with the Green New Deal, we need to be thinking about where we're going as a society and how we could rapidly get to a place that's going to be a whole lot safer. So our meeting for the Climate Action Committee is next Tuesday on the 8th, 7 o'clock at the Community Center, if anybody is interested in just coming and listening, watching, or potentially joining us. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Jody. Cindy?
Cindy Swift, Fairfax. I'd like to request the town help communicate Planning Commission and Council meetings by placing 3 signs in the downtown area before the meetings. The signs could be at the traditional Fairfax sign in the park, and the other 2 could be in the parkade, one on the east side, perhaps attached to the sign that the Native Sons provided, and the 3rd sign could be on the west end of the parkade. These signs would reach the majority of the community, I think, and augment the email notifications that go out to people that have signed up for those, and be a good visual reminder of the upcoming meetings. Thank you.
Thank you. Morgan?
Morgan Hall, 10 Moss Lane, right here in town. And I guess in about a month, we're going to vote on the Measure N, the municipal services tax.
F, yeah.
And I just wanted to say that I have a few misgivings about Measure
Okay,
N.
so the town council cannot be a place to talk about politics, unfortunately. So
No?
you can talk to me as the chair of the campaign outside the meeting. We can't mix political campaigns with town council business.
Really? Okay.
Well, you can just point out your misgivings. Why don't you just bullet them out very quickly?
Well, I just think that there are going to be a lot of seniors coming up, baby boomers. I'm one of them. Many, many, many are coming down the pike, and they're going to need help. And I would hope the town council keeps that in mind and directs any funds from the tax, should it pass, in that direction. Fairfax bills itself as being age-friendly. I think that's quite important. There's no exemption for seniors for Measure N?
It's Measure F, and
F?
there is no exemption.
Right. There's also no provision for any kind of economic downturn. So I'm a baby boomer, and I have dependent on Social Security and the income from 4 modest rentals here in town for my living. And to be taxed on average $1,000 a year for 11 years is kind of hard, given my financial situation. And I don't think, in general, the people of Fairfax are very well heeled. And anyone who has a property and is going to be taxed, many of the seniors don't have a lot of money. They may be on Proposition 13. And likewise, I think this tax is going to be a burden on them. And I think, I have no problems with police and fire, to whom the lion's share of this tax revenue is going to go. But I do know that, there are a number of policemen and firemen that get $200,000-300,000 a year. I mean, that's...
So we need to wrap it up, and I just want to point out it's a renewal. It's not a new tax.
I'm sorry?
It's a renewal. It's not a new tax.
Yes, but it's also, times are a whole lot different now than they were even 5 years ago.
And I'd be happy to talk to you outside this meeting. Thank you, Morgan.
Well, thanks for listening to me.
Thank you.
Council, Michael McIntosh. And Mayor, this really comes up to your comment, and that's why I stood up here. When the town of Fairfax presents any sort of measure and a citizen comes up here to discuss it or share their grievances, for you to shut them down is really bad form. Morgan took the time to come up here and express his concerns about something.
Thank you,
No,
Michael.
excuse me, you're interrupting my time.
Okay.
So Morgan came up here and took the time to express his concern, and you immediately tried to shut him down, saying it was political. All he was doing was explaining the hardship that he and his demographic group might or will receive from this. And I also remember when this tax first came up. The first time it came around, it didn't pass. The second time it came around, it was supposed to sunset. It was this temporary thing, and it didn't. It's continued. But today, or tomorrow, or any other time, if this town ever brings up an issue for the citizens, and the citizens take the time to come up here and speak before you, they should be allowed that time.
Thank you. Stephanie.
Good evening, Stephanie Hellman. I live on Manor Hill. I'd like to request that the council look to influence or work with staff on the transparency of the agendas for the Planning Commission and perhaps all the commissions. I had the opportunity to attend the last Planning Commission. The September agenda was rather opaque, and I was the only public attendee at that commission meeting, with the exception of the people who were applying for permits. And the planning director provided a pretty detailed update on the Wall property. Now, as I walk the neighborhoods, there's a lot of interest and concern about the Wall property, particularly the Miranda Oaks neighborhood. And I would suspect that there would have been 10 to 20 attendees that evening from that neighborhood had they known that there would be a 15-minute update on that development. So I would ask that in the future, if there would be an update on the Wall property by the director, that would be detailed on the agenda. Does that make sense to the council?
Thank you. Sure. Thank you.
Great. Thank you.
Anybody else want to speak in open time? Seeing none, bringing it back to the council. Moving on to the consent calendar. Are there any questions of staff or comments about consent calendar items? Or Garrett, would you like to add something?
Yes, Madam Mayor. Just to point out, you have a revision in some of the minutes. It should be on the dais, so you may have received that as a supplemental. We want to point out on item 9, when you adopt the resolution, we pointed out to us the typo. The application period begins November 1st, 2019, not November 1st, 2020. So we apologize for that. Item 10, we did give you a supplemental change to the actual resolution. The main change in the resolution gives the town manager authority to sign amendments to the JPA prior to it being placed on the ballot by the county. I know the fire chief, Chief Weber, is here, and he can report on the other supplemental material that we handed out on the dais, which is proposed amendments to the actual JPA.
I want to point out there is nothing on the dais, at least in my spot. We got things in our boxes, but if you have subsequent changes, we don't have those.
So I gave the supplements for item 7, the minutes, and they were dropped off in your mailboxes.
Okay, well, I don't think those of us checked our mailboxes, not all of us. Okay. Okay, well, that's great.
So,
they're not on the dais, which was what I was
but you
mixed up.
might have got it from the mailbox.
Okay.
Okay, my bad. And then the last thing is item 13. I believe you should have, maybe in your inbox, gotten the scope of work for item 13, which is Meadowway Bridge. And that is, right there, handed out.
Well, no, so what was put on the dais were, excuse me.
I think what's up here is a presentation for the cost allocation plan, a supplement to agenda item 10, and a supplement to agenda item 13, which is an email, and then revised attachment B for the cost allocation item, whichever that is. That's what's on the dais right now.
So you do have the
so it's an
supplemental
email?
for yeah, it looks like an email, but it's a scope of work for Meadowway Bridge, and the cost is about $23,000 for the repair, but the item does ask for $35,000 just for unforeseen field conditions that may arise, because we find as we lift more planks out and replace it, we find that there's more dry rot to be replaced.
Okay, so thank you for that clarification. Would there be questions of staff or any items that somebody would like to pull?
Yes.
Yes, go ahead. Renee.
I would request that we pull item 10, which is to adopt the resolution for the JPA, Wildfire Prevention Authority, and only so that there may be public comment on the item. I feel as though that's in order in this situation, and I would like to offer the opportunity to the public to voice their concerns, questions, support. And I'd be happy to have that happen tonight. In fact,
I think if we do pull it, we should do it immediately after consent.
yes, I agree. And then the other piece is item 15. So thank you very much for applying for the California Clean Air Day. I love that we're going to plant 4 trees, but I wondered if you guys have decided where they're going to be planted.
We already know, so there's one in the monolot, the new mimosa tree planted in addition to the other mimosa tree in the parkade, and the 2 across from Town Hall.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
So,
That's it.
So I think before we, why don't we just vote on the idea of pulling item 10, because I think I was going to ask for that as well. did
I'd like
someone-
to make a motion that we approve consent, but pull item 10.
No, we have to have public comment.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'd like to make a motion that we pull item 10 from consent.
Second.
And then, all in favor with that?
Aye.
Aye. And let's move that right after after we get through consent.
And Mayor, if I could ask
Yes.
Garrett a qualifying question. The email that is on our dais from Dave Smiley, it talks about a budget of $23,000 to do this, repair these planks and put in these bolts and so forth. Is that in addition to the original staff report, which talked about spending about $25,000 for repair works?
Yes, that's correct. The other work actually was performed for slightly under 25,000. We had a contingency of 10,000. We didn't need it, but at that time he had reported that the other side of the bridge needed similar work, but he couldn't perform it until after October 15th. And so we agreed we'd come back to council for approval for the other side. So this 23 would be in addition to the 24,000 plus that was spent just last month.
I think it's,
So-
if I understand the question, I think he's asking, is it on top of the 35,000 or is it included within the 35,000?
Oh, no, it's included within the 35. I thought he was asking if it was in addition to the 25 we spent last month.
Okay, now I'm confused. So we spent 25 last month.
Yes, we spent 25 last month. This would be an additional 23. The 23 is within the request for 35 because the difference is the contingency reserve that we may need for additional work once we start the work on the bridge. Does that make
Because the
sense?
contingency was how much?
In other words,
10. So the total,
the total request is 35, authority up to 35, the work is 23, and the contingency is 12,000.
okay, so we're right at 35.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay.
Okay.
And what is the amount that requires council approval for contracts? Is it 40,000 now? Is it
I have authority up to 25,000.
25? Okay.
And so that's why, but this one, rather than just doing the contract under my authority, I actually wanted to take it to the council so we could get authority with the contingency reserve to go up to the 35. That's why it's before you.
Okay. Okay, thanks.
Okay, so I'd like to see if anyone in the public would like to comment on any items, understanding that we've pulled item 10 and we'll take that up separately. So seeing none, bringing it back. Would someone like to make a motion regarding the consent calendar?
I would like to move that we approve consent and we pull item 10 and hear it immediately following consent.
With also the change that was done in item 9 for the resolution that Garrett pointed out, the date change.
With the change to item 9, the date change for the cannabis business permit procedures.
Okay.
With the amendments to the minutes as well.
Okay, thank you.
And I'll second that.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. So that was Goddard and then Ackerman second with a friendly amendment. Okay, so let's move on to item 10, please. And I know we have Chief Weber here. We also have Supervisor Rice. Quite a few folks here, and Todd Landau. So probably what's best is that we go ahead and have a staff report. And who is going to do that? Would that be Garrett?
I think it'd probably be best if Chief Weber gives you a staff report, but just to clarify, ultimately what you would be adopting is kind of the revised resolution, and Chief Weber is going to explain the intent of those amendments, but you should have a copy of the amendments in your packet of materials. But we can check on that after Chief Weber makes his presentation.
I think we have a supplement to agenda item 10, attachment B. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. All right. Chief Weber, thank you.
Mayor, council members, thank you. Thanks for having me here. So I won't take a deep dive into the presentation we did last time, but following up on the staff report, it's been 135 years to reach the point we're at and with the state of our landscape. Fire was a natural part of this landscape before we interrupted it by putting all the fires out and moving into the hillsides and developing. The really primary goals of the JPA remain get people out alive, protect their homes from being destroyed, and then create a landscape that's tolerant of fire, all in an environmentally sensitive way. 14 years ago, Marin developed the first countywide fire plan. Subsequently, 3 supporting documents were used to create the JPA and associated work plan. That's the Community Wildfire Protection Plan, the Lessons Learned report from the 2017 North Bay fires, and the grand jury report earlier this year. Over the last year, the fire chiefs, city managers have worked to develop the JPA, including 37 public meetings to gather information, feedback from councils, boards, and stakeholders. Some of the changes from the feedback are included in the document in front of you today. Those changes include governance with representation from all member agencies on the board, as well as representation on the operations committee. A strong citizens oversight committee with a requirement for an annual report on both the finances and the work plans, ensuring the process is transparent and the most cost-effective method of applying this. Most recently, in one of the amendments, is a return to source guarantee on the geographical areas. So what we've heard from, I think, all of you, others, is the importance of the money that's generated here being returned to protect these communities. That's addressed in this, the most current amendment. Our climate is changing at an alarming rate, and we have to be prepared for that. The length of the measure is something that you've heard and may hear tonight from speakers. I would just bring up that this is beyond a one-time need, like a building or repaving of a street. Our climate is changing, as I mentioned. We've added language to an up to tax, so the board has the ability to turn the tax all the way down to 0. So if we do get to a point where we're in maintenance mode, that board can make the adjustment in the tax to lower that. We've added 5 years reviews for opportunities for change. We understand this is a new JPA. Public hearing in front of the Board of Supervisors every 10 years to determine whether this should go back in front of the voters to either be subsequently changed or repealed. Polling examples are based on solid, significant, statistical, valuable information and experience locally and across the state by Godby. And that polling information shows that there's about a 13% difference from setting the tax at 18 years or leaving it until repealed by voters. Cost was included early in the process and provided valuable information. Most of their recommendations were included and or addressed. We have very successful JPAs within the fire service, including the Countywide Hazardous Materials JPA, the Ross Valley Paramedic Authority, the Southern Marin Paramedic Emergency System. These agencies have provided over 30 years of excellent services, have no retirement or OPEB liabilities. The JPA before you tonight is thoughtful, legally sound, and collaboratively developed. I'm wrapping up my 25th fire season in the county. I've seen communities across the state destroyed, countless lives lost, and irreparable damage caused. With the current investment, we cannot bring this community to the level of fire safety that I'm comfortable with as your fire chief. I've heard from many residents that are demanding more be done. The current effort, this JPA, and bringing our community together will move the dial to a level that we will all feel comfortable with. And I think you should all be commended for the investments you continue to make in safety in this community. Tonight, you're being asked to put before the electorate and through the democratic process and let it unfold. As your fire chief, I encourage you to support this and support you as you make this decision tonight, and thank you.
So any questions of Chief Weber from the council?
I have one.
Okay, go ahead.
Thank you, Chief. Much appreciated. On the last page of the staff report, it notes that that all funds would stay in Marin County and must be used for wildfire prevention and cannot be diverted. It then states a portion of the funds generated by the tax, so 20%, would be allocated to the taxing agencies, Fairfax being one of them. So is that determined per capita? How is that determined in terms of what our allocation of the 20% would be?
So the allocation of the 20% is based on the square foot, because there's a square foot assessment. So it's the funds generated within the community of Fairfax. And that's based on the tax. And so it would be a 20% return on that.
Right. And the estimate was what, Chief? Didn't we say it was like, do you know off the top of your head? It's like 200,000, 150, 200,000?
Give me
roughly?
2 seconds. I'll come back to that as I look it up. I'm losing track with all these meetings. I can take another question as I'm digging.
Yeah, well, we can come back to that. I think Garrett had told me it's around 200,000 would come back within our 20%. But any other questions of Chief Weber from members of the council? You know, why don't we give you a break and let you get back to us on that? After we, oh, did you find it?
It's 100,000 is 20%. So the total generated would be around 500,000. That estimate was based on 11 cents. After the tax study, we're at 10. I don't think it'll be substantially different, but we did change apartments, and that tax study information is available to your council. The apartments went to a flat rate. Open lots went to a 25, 75, or 150 element after the tax study, but I would not suspect that number to change dramatically.
So you think it's 100,000?
100,000 would be local, and then 100,000 for defensible space, and 300,000 towards core programs.
Okay, thank you. So with that, I'll open it up to public comment. Chief, you can take a seat and we'll call you up if we need follow-up. So would anybody like to make a comment on this? Oh, I'm not doing a hearing. Would anyone like to comment on this item? Twenty percent of 500,000 is 100,000.
Thank you, Mayor. Frank Eager, Meadowway in Fairfax. You know, it's important that this timely issue is being brought to the forefront and addressed on a countywide effort. I do have a few questions and then a couple of concerns. So it would be important for the residents of Fairfax to know how much revenue, how many dollars in taxes will be generated from Fairfax, not from the Ross Valley, but from Fairfax. I don't know if that's been figured out yet, but we should know how much Fairfax residents are going to be paying for this new tax. We've been told with an amendment that 80% of the funds will be returned to the area, and I guess, is that the entire Ross Valley? So is that, I don't know what the
Why
area.
don't we do this? We'll take your questions. We'll
Okay.
have the chief get up and respond to
Okay.
those after, if that's all right, Frank.
So, okay, so then the question is will the 80% come back to Fairfax, or will it come to the entire Ross Valley? On the issue of giving the town manager the authority to amend the agreement, the authority to amend the agreement should remain with the town council. Period. On the term of the agreement, it's unlimited. I mean, it's a permanent tax. They may be able to review it from time to time, but it's a permanent tax. And you know, Fairfax has a tax on a November ballot. It has an 11-year expiration date. There's a group in the county calling for a 10-year expiration date and a renewal time for this tax. So it seems to make sense that there be an expiration date and a time for a renewal, so the voters can see how it's worked for our communities. You know, has it accomplished what we thought it was going to accomplish? And of course, if it has, then the voters will reapprove it after 10 or 11 years, rather than this, you know, a permanent tax.
Oh, thank you, Frank. Let's see if we have other public comment, and then we'll ask the chief to respond to those. Other public comment on this item? Todd?
Thank you for hearing this, discussing this. I'm Todd Lando with Fire Safe Marin. Fire Safe Marin was created 28 years ago in the aftermath of the Oakland Hills fire, 12 miles from where we're sitting. It was the first wildfire I fought as a young firefighter. My life influenced the community through the creation of this organization, Fire Safe Marin. For 28 years, we've brought together private landowners, individual homeowners, homeowners association representatives, fire chiefs, scientists, elected officials, and anybody with an interest in wildfires, wildfire protection, to sit at one table to discuss these issues, to plan, develop policies, and work together at a countywide level to reduce our risk of wildfires, because as the chief, it's now been repeated ad nauseum, wildfires do not respect any boundaries. The 2015 and 2016 update to the Community Wildfire Protection Plan, which was led by Fire Safe Marin and Marin County Fire Department and your fire agencies, is a science-based document. This JPA will be following the recommendations outlined in the CWPP. That document's been lauded by ABAG. The 2018 Wildfire Resiliency Report by ABAG stated that Marin County is the Bay Area jurisdiction that has done the most to characterize and map wildfire hazard at the local levels. 5 threat classes for wildfires, these are quotes, have been mapped in California: extreme, very high, high, moderate, or not rated. The extreme category in California is concentrated in Southern California. The only occurrence of the extreme category in Northern California occurs in Marin County. In Marin County, to date, climate change has not been well referenced within community wildfire protection plans in the Bay Area. Only Marin County included the influence of climate change in fire hazard characterization. This is a guiding document that will present the JPA with the plans, with the work program, with the goals and accomplishments that they'll carry forward. So Fire Safe Marin is proud to have been a part of this process, to carry it forward, to have worked with your community for 28 years, and we hope that you'll move forward with joining the JPA. Thank you for considering it.
Thank you. Supervisor Rice, would you like to speak on this item?
Yeah, could I?
Of course.
Honorable Mayor and Council, thank you for having me here tonight and for having this on the agenda. I think just to take a moment, it's really the creation of this JPA that is asking us all as communities, community members, to join together to work on our wildfire risk is a historic action. And it may not feel like it right now, but assuming we can get everyone on board, I think we'll be the only county to have something like this in place, where we have said with our action, and if the voters approve the funding measure in March, if it goes on the ballot, actually our voters behind us given the funding to actually approach wildfire and this public safety risk as a collective and in a comprehensive way. And as Todd and Chief Weber have said before me, what we've seen in recent years tells us we cannot approach wildfire prevention on a jurisdiction by jurisdiction basis. We need to be approaching this as a whole. So I just urge you to support this, take the action to join the JPA, and recognize the historic nature of it. And then as we move forward, continue to work together to actually do the absolute best we can to make sure we have a very safe community. Thank you.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to speak on this item? Jody?
Jody Timms, Cascade Drive. As a member of 350 Marin, the climate justice organization referenced before, I've been part of a coalition of environmental groups that have looked closely at this and worked with county staff and others to provide input. And setting it in the context of climate change is something that was very important to us. Issues around carbon sequestration, and also the Citizen Advisory Committee. The process to me has worked very well. There's a lot of openness and input, and that coalition of environmental groups supports this measure going on the ballot. So I just want to mention that, our support.
Thank you.
Richard Applebaum, 61 Woodland. I don't have any expertise around this to have a strong opinion. It sounds like this is a good thing to happen. But the one thing that has occurred to me as I was sitting here thinking is that when we're involved in a kind of joint partnership, and that's where all our funds are going, then that's where the administration of whatever steps and precautionary things and information dissemination all comes from. And where we'd ever be in a situation where we had new information or we had other concerns locally here in Fairfax, would we basically, would our council then be saying, we don't have any other funds to do anything? Or if there were some specific things that we felt we wanted to have happen here that weren't the recommendations of this organization and that leadership, are we just sort of like, that's it? Nothing else can happen for us locally? Or is this not going to be exclusive and we could still, I don't know, like for instance, the goat stuff that happened, last year, and let's say goats wasn't part of a recommendation or a budget or whatever, and we still wanted to do that.
I think part of, we would still try to allocate monies to do additional efforts on top of this. This isn't intended to tell us, no, we can't do additional things, and I think at least this council has been very supportive of doing those kinds of efforts.
Great, thank you.
If I may just add very briefly
Sure.
that last year, the Measure J, which is becoming Measure F, 80% of those funds went to fire and public safety. And so that money is separate from what would be taxpayers' money into this JPA. So those are projects that we do on our own that we keep available for things like you're talking about.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Richard. Anybody else like to speak on this topic? So Chief Weber, I think you jotted down those questions that Frank Egger had. Maybe you could respond.
Gotta hit the button.
There we go. Thanks. Thank you, Mayor, council members. So as mentioned before, the estimated investment from your constituents would be around $500,000. The question about the return to source piece, the purpose of the JPA is to ensure that we are looking at this beyond our boundaries, and we understand that fire knows no boundaries, and if we're not collectively doing things together and strategically, we're going to end up where we continue to be chasing grant dollars or being inconsistent in our approach. So the intent here is for the 5 geographical areas to work together to not only prioritize projects, but make sure they go beyond jurisdictional boundaries and beyond, and we know if something happens on the watershed or in Woodacre or in Sleepy Hollow, the effects of Fairfax are significant. And that together, when we're making those investments with our neighbors who are partners in this, we are more strategic and we're more efficient with our dollars, and they go farther. So that's really the intention behind that. If it was a direct return to source by the municipality, we would not be as strategic and the priorities would be in conflict. The term of the agreement, and as I mentioned, the multiple reasons why this is a long-term issue, our polling results certainly indicate that we'd be shooting ourselves in the foot if we chose one of these 8, 10, or 18-year choices. They're substantially lower to get across the threshold of 2/3. And then to answer the last question is the way the funding is broken down under the formula 60-20-20, 60 core services, that's vegetation management, evacuation programs, grants, et cetera. Then you get into 20%, which is your defensible space. Most of Fairfax is privately owned, and that's getting in there, doing the evaluations, working with our homeowners to improve not only hardening the home, but the defensible space around it. And we know we have a lot of work to do there. Our compliance rate after this summer was 31%. So almost 70% non-compliance means that we have a lot of work to do in that category. And then also that 20% piece, which is important, and that comes directly back to you as a council to decide how to allocate those funds so you can prioritize and accelerate local projects.
So just, I believe there was a question, and I'm not sure if you're the one that answered this. my reading of this is that if we approve this tonight, we would be authorizing the town manager to sign the JPA agreement. And as far as amendments to the JPA agreement, we're not authorizing the town manager to do that. There's a section in the agreement that talks about amendments by one or more supplemental agreements executed by 3/4 of the governing boards, but I'm not sure, is there a place in the agreement where it's authorizing the town manager to sign amendments?
No, it's actually the resolution. The resolution the council approves basically says what it says is authorize the town manager to sign the joint exercise of powers agreement, including any amendments to the JPA agreement made by the county board of supervisors prior to the board of supervisors placing the tax measure on the March 20th,
Okay.
March 2020 ballot. So the reason for that was exactly for this purpose. We were anticipating there could be changes to get everybody on board, because it really doesn't work unless you really have almost everybody on board. And the problem, as the chief is well aware, is you have 19 different taxing agencies who all have to agree on one JPA agreement and how it's going to work. And you can't have JPA agreements being different for everybody. And so we would just be signing what everybody else signs, unless the council wanted to have a special meeting for any amendments that the board might agree to. This was thought to be the most efficient way, because the board meets on November 5th, and we meet November 6th. And so they need to know before then if we're in or out.
I think, Mayor, your specific question is these two amendments before you today, well, excuse me, there's three of them, on the subsequent page are to amend the JPA in front of you. Collectively, we think we have agreement across the board that there will be no more amendments to the JPA until you get to the point where you mentioned the section in there, and everybody working together, there's going to be some adjustments.
So let me ask you, have you gone to all the, not necessarily you, but has the potential parties like Bill Tyler and others gone to all 19? Are we the last?
No. So we have four members currently. I just got a text message from Novato. That's 5. It's in front of your council tonight. But the JPA has to stop moving because we need to move forward in order to do the resolution in November. So what we're asking for is your ability to move forward with the JPA with the 3 amendments that are on that separate piece of paper that you have. And then we would come back after the vote in March, if that's where we end up. And if there's something specific that we need to do that makes sense for everybody, we would use the language in there to amend the JPA, which is 3/4.
So I guess my issue is this, is that it sounds like we're not looking at we're hoping there's no more significant amendments to the JPA. And so if we authorize this tonight, in the unlikely event that there's some sort of radical change to the JPA, and I don't know that that would happen, would we want to do a special meeting of this council just to make sure if it's a significant change? And as far as if the tax passes in March, and then there needs to be additional changes to the JPA agreement, I think that should come to the council. We're not authorizing that.
No, that would. I think the whole purpose of this, to be clear, was just to provide, granted, it's a little different now because we know what the changes are, but prior to like
3 o'clock,
an hour ago or 2, we really didn't even have this language. And so the thought pattern was, and we knew something was coming, and that it would provide the flexibility so we would not have to have a special council meeting. That being said, if the council wants to have a special council meeting, we can do that. I think we just wanted to avoid that, and it's pretty much the idea was this is probably it, but if they did a couple other minor changes, no big deal. Then we wouldn't have to have a special meeting.
To clarify, just so that I understand, we're talking about the authority, that we'd be granting you the authority, and it would only be during this period of time between now and November 6th, correct?
That is,
or up until it's on the ballot?
No, up to November. My
Because it
thought
has to
was
be
up to
submitted.
November
November
6th.
6th.
And I think the intention is
Got
minor,
it.
non-substantive
I got
changes. An attorney finds a comma missing. There's a punctuation error, those kind of things. I will assure you at this point that this JPA is done moving. I think we have the working group that has said, if it moves more, this process doesn't go forward, because we can't do that. We have to move it forward.
Okay, so we're really talking about minor changes. We don't anticipate anything radical happening. Well, then, with that...
I have one more question.
Go ahead, Renee, I'm sorry.
So, Chief, just because I know that there's a lot of, obviously confusion around this measure because these things are incredibly complex, just a scenario. Since only 30% of folks were in compliance with the clearance rules and all of the defensible space regulations, I've spoken to many of that 70% who just can't do it, whether they're seniors or disabled, or they just can't get to it, or they don't have the financial means. Is there something in this that would help with that?
Absolutely.
in
So
supporting people?
there, and I think I sent your council a wonderful voicemail from a lady that's disabled in bed, physically can't do it. We use grant funds to support bringing a contractor in and doing the abatement on the house, which not only protects her, which has mobility issues, but her neighbors' homes that are affected also. So there's grant funds in that arena. The local piece will allow your council to make decisions. You have an aging community, you need to accelerate grants. We need to be doing more in a certain neighborhood that we know is the most impacted. You will have the discretion to use those funds for that and accelerate those programs. So it has a built-in grant program, and then additionally, it has the local funds which your council can choose to use in that manner.
Isn't it also true, since I participated in some other meetings, that the authority would also seek grants as the authority, so that hopefully there's some possibility of building on the revenues that are coming in through the tax by bringing in more grants, because to be more powerful as an authority, right?
You couldn't have said it better, and that's exactly it.
I think that's what I've heard in meetings.
We
so.
are going to be very aggressive in our pursuit of state and federal grants. That will help with our watershed work. One TAM is doing a great job. They have almost a $750,000 grant to study the watershed and how to make it healthier. We need to accelerate that process, but locally, FEMA grants for people to harden their homes, that's really expensive. There's 75% cost matches that are available, but it takes quite a bit to get the grant program up and running. This will allow us to do that.
Okay, other questions of
Sure.
Chief Weber?
Yes, if I may, Chief. Does the ballot funding measure itself expire, and would that need to be renewed? In other words, the tax measure to fund this?
So the proposal is until repealed by voters. The mechanisms that have been put in place are the board can turn the tax down from 10 cents to 0 if they chose, which would essentially eliminate the JPA. Every 10 years, there'll be a public hearing in front of the Board of Supervisors. That was one of the amendments, where the board, instead of having to go through and get signatures from that large number, the board, if enough of the group, the population, the board could take action to put it on the ballot to make amendments to the tax piece, the tax measure, or repeal it. So those are the mechanisms we've put in place to address the long-term thing. And as I mentioned, doesn't necessarily make sense, but the polling is very clear, and it's very strong polling statistically, that if we place it on there with a termination of 10 years, as some information is being floated, it's almost guaranteed to fail.
Interesting. So the mechanism, if someone wanted to terminate this, would have to be another ballot measure?
That's correct, or going to the Board of Supervisors and having them place it on the ballot, or going to the board of this JPA and lobbying that they turn the tax down or turn it off. So those are the mechanisms in place that we have worked with concerned residents about the perpetuity piece.
So maybe I missed something real quick. Just what if Fairfax wanted to do that on its own? Is that what you're referring to?
No,
I mean,
so
what if one of the cities wanted to cede from the JPA?
that becomes problematic. And the mechanism we have there is to come back in and discuss what the issues are rather than just bail out.
Okay.
So
I
because
just
this
wanna
is
make sure I understood.
countywide, yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, so seeing no more questions, would somebody like to make a motion? And remember, we have a supplement that we would need to approve as part of this if we're going to go do so.
But before we do, I just want to make just a few brief comments. The permanency of it is a little troubling, and it is creating, kind of, it's creating pretty much a permanent agency that does have some fairly broad powers, and that is concerning. But having served on the fire board for a couple of years and having started to look at these issues and getting our own inspection program off the ground, it is really important to have a county-wide reach to be able to plan for evacuations and also address some of the larger vegetation issues, because as often people have pointed out, fire doesn't pay attention to jurisdictional boundaries. And our planning has to be beyond just the jurisdictional boundaries of each town. So the scope of this agency really does need to be countywide, I think, to address the issues. And also the larger vegetation management issues, because what we've seen in recent years with, mitigation measures is that it's sort of, Sleepy Hollow brings in goats. Well, why can't we get goats? Well, okay, Fairfax, the next year we have to make efforts to try to get these measures implemented. So it really does have to be on a larger scale, and I'm confident and hopeful that the leveraging ability to get the grants is also something that this agency can take on, because our staff just doesn't have the bandwidth to go after these grants. Firewise has done a great job on that, but I think it really does need to be a permanent, dedicated agency to take that on. So with those reservations, which those are serious reservations for me, I still would support this, and because I think this is a rare instance where the importance of addressing it at this level and the efficacy of addressing it at this level really, I think, outweighs the concerns about creating another kind of permanent government entity. So those are my comments. I just wanted to air them before we vote.
I also need to ask one more question, because I think this is important to people who may be tuning in here. We speak of the Citizens Oversight Committee. Can you just briefly describe who are the members? What is that made up of?
Sure, thank you. So it would include a member from each of the 5 geographical areas, a member of a taxing group in the county, a member of a nonpartisan voting group such as League of Women Voters, and a member of a fire safe organization. I'm intentionally being broad because sometimes those organizations come or go, but you're looking for that level of interest. In the COC is a mandatory requirement that they provide an annual report that looks back at the work being done and the money spent, and then looks forward at the work plan and the proposed funds being spent, and then provides that as a public document. And the intention there, again, is transparency, setting quality metrics that we follow, that we know we are achieving.
Thank you, Chief. Would somebody like to make a motion? Thank you, everyone, for your comments and thoughtfulness on this item.
I'll make the motion.
Okay, thank you, Peter.
I move that we adopt a resolution to, 1, join the joint exercise of powers agreement to create the Marin Wildfire Prevention Authority. 2, authorize the town manager to do everything necessary and appropriate to sign the joint resolution of powers agreement. And 3, request that County Marin place a parcel tax measure on the March 3rd, 2020 ballot, and generally adopt a resolution to join the Marin Wildfire Prevention Agency, and pass a resolution as amended tonight with the supplements to items A, or attachments A and B.
Second.
It's a tie.
Okay, I'm sorry, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion passes. Thank you very much.
Thank you, council members. Much appreciated.
Thank you.
So, Madam Mayor, just before I request maybe a 5-minute break so we get set up, I'd really like to thank Chief Weber for all his hard work on this. 19 taxing agencies, 11 city town managers, numerous electeds. This thing was going sideways 2 weeks ago. And so for him to get it to this point, along with working with Matthew, the county administrator, I think that's very impressive work. And also like to thank Supervisor Rice for our support on this measure.
Thank you, and thank you all. Thank you, Chief Weber. You're a man who's in 1,000 places at once. I don't know how you do it. Thank you very much. So let's take a 5-minute break, everyone, and we'll reconvene. Our next item is item 17, which is adopt a resolution amending the town's master fee schedule to update all fees and permits. I think it's update all fees and permit fees from 2009. And Garrett, would you like to do the staff report? And I know we have some supplements, and I believe we were able to place those on the town website as well, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. So if you could give us a staff report, that would be great.
Sure. So pretty much I'll give kind of a brief overview, and then I'll turn it over to Ty, who's the VP with, I always forget the name of your company, Revenue and Cost Specialists, who we contracted with to do this fee study. So maybe as background, the last time the town actually conducted a fee study was back in 2009. And really the purpose of fee studies is, in essence, to figure out the true cost of delivering what we call as a fee finance service, things like use permits or building permit. What's the actual cost to deliver that service? And so what we've done is really since 2009, the town hasn't increased any of these fees other than some facility rental fees, a couple fees here and there. But for the most part, we haven't increased fees since 2009. So as I indicated, back in July 2018, we contracted with Revenue Cost Specialists to conduct the user fee study and cost allocation study. Thought pattern being that we can come to the council and you could see the background information to make some policy decisions regarding fees, because ultimately it's all a policy determination of where you'd like to set the fee levels in terms of cost recovery. And so Chu can go through ultimately what RCS does when going through the fees, but it's no surprise, obviously, our cost recovery levels are about overall 50%. The report does talk about you could increase fees upwards of $270,000 overall in terms of generating revenue. We're not actually recommending that. Staff did sit down with the council's finance subcommittee consisting of the mayor, Mayor Kohler, and Vice Mayor Goddard, and we're actually recommending something a little different. It's a combination of some increases in fees and a combination of phasing in fees over time, and each fee actually has a different cost recovery ratio when you look at it overall. The fees actually we're recommending wouldn't take place until July 1, 2020 to give plenty of ample notice to the community on the different fee increases. And so some of the things, one of the things that we did revise is Table B. Table B kind of takes a look at the overall cost recovery estimated ratio for the town. It replaces what we previously gave you, and that's the supplement. And if you go to the last page on the bottom, you'll see that there's an overall ratio there. And so on the bottom, and that's on page 3 of that table B, it says revised in red, in case you're looking for it. There you go, page 3 of table B. If you look at the bottom.
It was also on the dais provided before the meeting, in case you're having trouble locating it. Yes, in red letters.
So anyway, if you look at that, basically what it does on the bottom, you'll see that under the proposed fee increases or recommendations and the phase-in periods, the phasing in of fees is typically almost all your planning and building fees, with some exceptions for jumping up to certain costs. You'll see that year 1 being fiscal year 2021, we think we'll be able to increase cost recovery from 50% to 55%. And then over the phase-in period, which is another 5 years, so by the end of fiscal year 25-26, we think maybe the cost recovery ratio would be about 65%. So that's overall. When you add everything together, you'll recover about 65% of the actual cost of services based on fees. And that's a very rough estimate, because what happens is we're such a small community, some of our fees are deposit-based as we charge our actual staff time. But for those fees, sometimes we don't get an application in a certain year, so there's no service to be provided or fee to be collected. So it's hard to project these things out. So what we're trying to do is to keep it apples and apples comparisons to RCS's work. We're trying to match up to where we thought there can be some additions to efficiencies to cost recovery. Now, some of the things that the finance subcommittee took into mind is they took into mind the reasonableness of an increase, the type of services provided, and some of the issues of what kind of burden it places on the applicant. So for planning and building fees, you don't want to jump it up so high so there's a disincentive for people not to come in and get a certain building permit or planning permit. So that was some of the different factors the finance committee kept in mind. But at the end of the day, what we came up with was some increases in some fees initially, some up to close to a recommended amount, others at a lower amount, and then phased in over a period of time to achieve the overall goal. I think one thing to keep in mind is when you look at the bottom of that supplemental table B on the bottom, it also show that the recommended fee increases for year 1, being starting in July 1, 2020, you'll achieve about a 12%, we're thinking, overall increase in fees. What that equates to is roughly maybe $70,000. But if you think about it, we haven't increased fees since 2009, so that's a 10-year period. If you divide that by 10, that's about a 1.2% a year if you were to do that every year going backwards, going retro.
I'm sorry, say that again.
So while it looks like it's a 12% increase in year 1 for the fee increase, if you actually spread that over 10 years, because you haven't increased fees for 10 years, it averages out to a little over 1%, 1.2%, which isn't even CPI. Moving forward with our phased-in approach, the overall impact of fees is roughly an average of 3.3%, which arguably could be CPI over this period of time. So really what you're doing is you're kind of taking a look, and if you, in essence, if you really look at it, you're pretty much increasing overall fees by really CPI. Now, some are higher, some are lower, but the practical effect is you're achieving a cost recovery about 65%, and you're doing a slight increase every year overall, some more than others. So I think pretty much that was kind of the overall overview I wanted to provide. One of the things is, since you have a lot of time before this will be implemented, we just wanted to bring it to you now tonight. If you're comfortable, you can adopt it. But if not, we can also have another council meeting to discuss it once you mull over some things, because the Council Finance Committee actually went through all these fees line by line, and we talked about what was reasonable in terms of an increase. And it got to be pretty difficult because a lot of the data, you just don't have a lot because you don't get certain applications. But with that, what I'd like to do is turn it over to Chu Tai to go ahead and make his presentation, and then we both can be available to answer questions.
Okay, thank you, Chu. Welcome to Fairfax. Thank you for all your work on this. We did go through this line by line, page by page in the Finance Committee, and I took copious notes. So Thank you, and let's get started.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of the City Council, Town Council. Very delighted to be here. I've been coming here since over a year. Back in August, I think about 10, 12 trips, and I've enjoyed Fairfax, the restaurants, the community, the parks. Some of the photos, I enjoy walking around taking photos. I have a lot that I'll share with Garrett if he wants to use it for later on. So it's been a great event, great opportunity. So I'd like to get started by talking about why we do what we do. And I want to talk about Prop 13. So Prop 13 was adopted by or approved by the state in 1978. And while that did a great job of protecting my property tax increase, it made it extremely challenging and complex for towns and cities to manage their budgets at that point, from that point on. And cities are having a lot of problems balancing their budget. So the following year, in 1979, the voters approved Prop 4. And Prop 4 allowed for communities to recover for costs reasonably borne. And that was very important. So the people, by 77%, said that they're okay with communities charging the applicant, the users, for services that's accounted for it. So that's 40 years ago, and we started our company in 1980. So we've been busy for 40 years. And what have we done is we've provided studies for that exact purpose, that we recasted the budget, we recasted government in a business orientation. Similar, like if I was to have my house, do a house remodel, I would know how much the architect would charge, I would know how much the plumber would charge, the electrician would charge. So we build and we try to structure how much the planning department would charge, how much the building division would charge. So that's what we focus on. We identified all the costs in the town, whether it's a service to an applicant or service to the general community. And we provide financial reports to help the town council as well as the community understand the financial impact of that. So town services can be broken down in three categories. First one is indirect charge. That's typical overhead. Any business would have overhead, which is legal, finance, IT, insurance, facility maintenance, building maintenance. Those get spread out among the services that are provided to the customers. And then we look at the service to the customers and we split out in two areas. One is community supported, which is typical tax service. When police service is a tax service and it serves the community as a whole, same as fire, same as street. And the difference between a community service and what we call a personal choice fee service is you cannot identify or easily identify the user, the beneficiary of that service. I can't see the police officer driving down the street and handing out invoices to the neighbors saying, this is your share of the tax service. It doesn't happen. So what's unique about the personal choice is that you can identify when someone comes up and have an application for a business, then that application, that process at the planning department helps that applicant, that business, as well as some recreation classes, as well as any police service. They're there. You can identify the customer. You can identify how much service they have asked for from the town. So our next task is to take all that information and build this cost accounting model. And as Garrett said, it took a lot of time. We came up, especially with planning. We go through the details of the process and the services that they offer. And we would dive into a lot of details about that. When we're asked, when we're looking at a service, let's say a conditional use permit, and Ben would say, it would take, I'm throwing it out there, 40 hours for that process, I would ask, why does it take 40 hours? And we break down every single step, and that could involve everything from intake, routing, review, conversations with the applicant, survey going out to the location, definitely the public hearing process. It takes, government is not a quick process. It takes a lot of time, and we put an hourly rate to that, so it does take a lot of involvement for that. So we look at all the services that the city's offered, the town's offered, and we spread it out. Those that are indirect get spread into the services to the public between a community supported and personnel supported. So we put all that together and we develop a report, and we make sure that we account for 100% of the employee as well, so that it's accounted for. And what we end up is the report that's presented to you. And our overall goal is to match revenues to costs. So here we have a diagram, I guess. So on the left side, it should be matched that taxes and grants that you receive as revenue should pay for community supported services, and fees should pay for personal choice services. And the summary of our study is that we identified about $270,000 that you are subsidizing with tax services. This is $270,000 that applicants from fees could pay for the services they received. And with that, you are losing out on the community supported services, which could typically, again, going back to the police, fire, recreation facilities. So that's basically what we show in our study. This is the cost recovery summary. Our policy is our report always push for, we always suggest 100% cost recovery. And we want to show that that is 100%. For community development, we showed about $224,000 in positive new recovery. Police, $43,000. Recreation, it's always challenging. We can never suggest 100% cost recovery, because if we do, no one would attend. So this one we always advise with the staff to say what is the best rate to set. And town-wide administrative service is about $4,000. So in the end, as Garrett said, it is town council that makes the final decision of how much of the subsidy is right for the community. A project goal was to identify the full cost of the various services. I work with staff to make the recommendations on every service, and now again it's up to town council to decide which service should be charged at full cost, which service should be subsidized with tax dollars. If you're interested in looking at the report, it's broken out in sections. Appendix A is the summary of the current fees and the proposed fees. Appendix B has the details of each fee. On the left side, it shows the responsible department, the number of service, the revenue and expenditure summary for it. And on the right side, it shows the detail of every service, how much time is involved and how many there are. And then Appendix C is the building fees. Appendix D in our report, it shows the recreation fees. However, I believe Garrett has given you more updated information or recommendations. And that concludes my presentation, and I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, would anyone on the council have questions for Chu or for Garrett? Peter?
Yes, thanks. So it's my understanding the most we can charge for a fee is 100% of the actual cost.
That's correct.
And I saw on this table that some of the fees that are proposed are at 100%, and that's obviously kind of a political choice, and I for the most part, agree with those. I think tobacco business licenses should be charged the full 100%. And I had a couple questions on some of these figures, though. Under police, just trying to understand if I'm reading this correctly. On page 2, for police reports, it says $5,000. Is that the total amount that's collected for police reports each year?
Yes.
Okay. It's not $5,000
Per
to
report, correct.
order a police report. Okay. So then, because some of the figures seem to be just the actual individual cost of the permit, like on the first page. Like for a fence variance, just understand, we've collected a total of $922 in fees. This is on the first page. For fence variances.
I believe that's per, I think for a fence variance, it's per cost. Garrett, it's 922 currently for a fence variance, correct?
I think in that case, in looking at the data, and actually I have another PowerPoint that actually compares the current fees to the proposed fees for each individual unit. I think this one might be one we only got one application.
Okay,
And so it
so-
was
so it happens
922. It just so happened it matches up that way. So it's difficult because some cases you get one, some you get 14, like use permit minor residential. Then you can actually figure out what seems to be reasonable. When you get one, it's a little funky when you're comparing it.
God, I was thrown by, because the fence permit seems, well, that seems, kind of in the ballpark of reasonable, but then the police report $5,000, so, okay.
But I'm sorry, but Peter, can I, just because you're on that item, so the actual cost, though, is $2,957 for a fence variance?
That, if you're referring to, I'm going to refer to
I'm just looking.
S011.
Correct.
Yeah.
The current fee is $461, and the suggested fee in our study for 100% cost recovery is $1,480.
Wait a minute. That's not what I'm seeing.
So are you talking about the fence variance?
Yeah,
So
which is
the fence
S011. It says 922.
Total current fee is 922.
And the-
Actual cost is 2,957.
Okay, so 922 would be 2 fence variants per year. So total revenues from fence variance is 922. And the suggested, I believe, would be a subsidized amount. That's why it's not at the total amount. Because in our fee study, the cost for 100% cost recovery is $1,478.
And the actual proposed fee increases are attachment D in the resolution that we're contemplating tonight.
Attachment D, is it? Okay, let me take a look
And
at
this attachment B, that just shows sort of the overarching analysis, correct, in terms of figuring out how much we're actually collecting versus how much we're actually spending for these various things.
I believe that's, our
Yeah,
objective.
the proposed fee, once we get to that PowerPoint, would be $510 for a fence variance.
Right.
Versus $461.
It's just kind of fascinating to see what these things cost and then
Yes, yeah.
how they add up. And does it really cost? So I'm really curious about the banners. That's like hanging a banner across Sir Francis Drake.
Yeah,
What does that cost to hang one banner one time?
For that, I think we said 3 hours. And what it is, and it changes a little bit, but you have the time for the office assistant to book it. And then how it worked is you had the time for 2 guys to go to San Anselmo to get the truck to come back. Takes 2 guys to do it. And then you get done, and then you drive back and drop the truck off, and then you got to drive back. And so you build in all that time, and it costs a fair amount of time. Granted, now we have our own bucket truck, so you save on travel, although we now assume 100% of maintenance costs. So it's
Sure.
probably a wash. And then part of the discussion with the finance subcommittee is what seems reasonable, and you could see, I think we increased it by $20 the first year and then $10 each subsequent year or something like that. So those are the things to keep in mind because we know those are nonprofits, but it seemed like $20 is not bad given you haven't increased it in, since 2009 or something like that.
Okay, thanks.
Other questions of staff or two? Seeing none, I'd like to.
Actually, I did have a couple questions. I'm just curious what our fees are in line with other towns. Do we have a rough seat of the pants kind of sense of where we are?
Well, you didn't necessarily do a market analysis, but Ben, he worked for the county and others, and he's indicating we're low compared to others.
And I would
Yes,
say, yeah.
I'm familiar with some other fee schedules, and for the most part, our fees are down from that. Probably salary savings, et cetera.
And I'm just curious if there are any fees that we would want to sort of keep low and politically, or sort of like almost like a subsidy, just to encourage that people come forward with these permits. Because if you raise the fees for the permits too much, people will be discouraged from actually applying for permits. And I'm just wondering, there's if these fees are, so expensive that they might be discouraging people from applying for permits.
So
I think we did talk about that. I mean, so every page in this report we went through, particularly looking at making a decision on every fee to increase, and we did discuss some of that. Now, I think what we're trying to do is something reasonable that wouldn't prevent people from coming in, but there still are going to be people who don't come in at the current rate. So if there's a specific one you wanted to raise, but we tried to keep that in line, and that's one of the reasons why we're not going for 100%. We wanted to say what makes sense, what isn't going to deter people, and also with the phase-in approach, it gives people, for most of them, not all of them, but with the phase-in approach, we felt it gave more people the opportunity to kind of get more in line with that. So I don't know if that's a satisfactory answer, but that's what we tried to do as we looked at each one line by line, and we looked at how much revenue, how much we're subsidizing, and then we talked about a fee for every single one.
So
I appreciate how laborious that would be, and I do, looking at some of these, looking at the choices where the percentage recovered is set pretty low. Obviously, it's sort of to kind of subsidize or encourage those types of applicants, and some of the less socially utilitarian ones like tobacco are right at 100%. So, so that's the difficulty of this exercise. I appreciate that.
Yeah, and I think that's why also Garrett stressed that if for some reason, you want to spend a lot more time and detail on each one, we could certainly continue this. But I think if you end up having a question as we go through this, and after the public hearing, if you want to talk about a specific one or two, but we always have that option of, continuing it so you have more time to really look at these in detail and look at the report in detail, because the report is pretty enlightening. If you just look at the tables, it's a bit mind-numbing, I will tell you, but it helps to have those tables. But as you look at the detail in the report, and everyone got all the detail right in the report, it helps you understand kind of where we came to those decisions. And we may not have always done the right thing. We tried. So other questions of staff or Chu? With that, Chu, I'd ask you to sit down, and I'm going to go ahead and open the public hearing. And So, opening the public hearing, Richard, it looks like you'd like to speak on this topic.
Just a couple quick comments. So since the public doesn't really get to weigh in on like each service and each fee adjustment or whatever, then obviously we're putting our confidence in all of you, staff and council, that they will be approached in a reasonable manner. And I heard the town manager remark that nothing had happened for 10 years, and if you amortized it in reverse order, it would only be 1.2 per year for 10 years to get to a 12%. And I'm just wondering if that logic is meaningful in the circumstance where we not doing something we should have been doing for 10 years, and now we're making it all up at one time, or...
Well, I think there's a couple of things, and I don't want to interrupt you, but just
That's
to
okay.
point out is that that's one of the reasons why we phased a lot over time, rather than just making the big jump. But go ahead, Richard, I'm sorry.
No, I mean, just in the sense that, if there was a reason that we didn't increase every 10 years, then that doesn't feel like a good line of reasoning to suddenly get to a certain place all in one shot. So if we were remiss in some way and we're making up for it, then I guess that could be reasonable too. So anyway, Peter made the remark also about, like, are there some things that would be deterrents? I think that was a kind of reasonable way of looking at it too. And I don't know what are the things that come up the most and what are the things that people are going to shy away from. So I have no real expertise in this, but I'm just giving a little input there. So.
Okay, thank you very much.
And also, Richard, if I could comment, it is a lengthy exercise, so it's not something we'd want to do, every year or every 2 years, and it's fairly expensive to pay for the study and the person hours that goes into it. So it's, something that 10 years may not be that unreasonable a time frame between looking at the fees, given just the cost of the exercise.
I think the cost of our exercise working with Shu was quite reasonable. I think staff diversion of resources was another cost, but it was incredibly reasonable. I just want to point out that I worked for the Department of Toxic Substances Control, a state agency, and we undertook an effort trying to figure out all our costs, our overhead, and rather than working with a company like yours, I believe we convened a blue ribbon panel of various experts. We probably spent way upwards of $750,000 and didn't have the level of detail that I see here. So for me, having gone through this experience at a very large agency in the state, I wish we would have worked with a company like yours. I keep learning things working in local government where I see that there are sometimes much better ways to do things where we made them more complex. But would other folks like to comment during the public hearing? Stephanie? You need to press the button.
Sorry, Stephanie Hellman, Manor Hill. I've done pricing studies. I have a marketing background, and I just was wondering two things. You mentioned you've done just a qualitative look at regional. Did you look at San Anselmo, or was just wondering what you looked at specifically? And then how palatable is this for Fairfax residents? Did you do a survey?
So Stephanie, you need to direct your questions
Oh, sorry,
to
I
us.
thought he did a study, sorry.
No, he did do the study, but you direct your questions to us and then we may ask.
Okay, how palatable is this for Fairfax residents? Did you do a qualitative survey and ask them what their sensitivity is to this pricing or to the fee changes?
No, we did not do that.
Okay.
And I think one of the things we tried to do in the Finance Committee was really look at these, and that's why we're not jumping to 100%, with the exception of just a few, and that's why we're phasing it over time, and that's why we looked at everyone in detail. And having this level of detail, knowing what we've been subsidizing versus what we potentially could recover, we didn't want to jump to that.
Okay.
Except with a few instances where it made sense.
And the regional question?
You know, we did talk about that kind of issue, and part of the deal is every town is different. So doing a study on different towns as far as what they're charging versus what we're charging, other than just doing kind of the qualitative kind of look, it's different based on the kinds of staff that they have and the number of staff that work on things. But no, we did not do that.
I'm
Garrett.
done with their questions, and I can answer.
Okay, go ahead. Did you have more questions or comments, Stephanie?
No, thank you.
I think we need to clarify the purpose of the fee study. The fee study for these service fees that are fee financed, they're not market driven. It's based on your actual costs of delivering the service. So there has to be a nexus between the service provided and the actual costs. So oddly, Mill Valley might charge, no disrespect to Mill Valley, but say they charge $1,500 and we charge $800. If the $800 is adequate to cover our costs, we can only charge $800. We can't charge $1,500. Conversely, the ones that are market-driven are recreation fees. And so that's compared to the market, and that's why our recreation facility fees, because they are older, our fees are intentionally lower, and increases are more marginal or nominal, because if you actually look at our costs of maintaining the facilities and delivering the services, obviously it far exceeds that, and that's why we have a 25% cost recovery ratio for recreation. Maybe it's probably for par for the course for cities. Some are higher, some are lower, but really for the fee services, it's what it costs us to deliver the fee, not what it costs other entities. Recreation being the difference. So I just need to point that out of what we're trying to achieve here.
And I believe, along with meeting with recreation staff, you met with the Park Commission to get their feedback on the recreation fees.
Right, and recreation definitely was market-driven. That's why the fees are very $5 to $10 increases in rental rates, classes, some nominal increases, and that's all based on what we think is the willingness to pay. And like Camp Fairfax is very reasonable, and so even when we do smaller increases or $20 increases, we're still like whatever, $100 less than similar camps. So that's what we take into
And
consideration.
it's also not just what people are willing to pay, but it's the culture here. I mean, those were very clear decisions that were made when Fairfax Rec, became its own entity. From San Anselmo Rec, was that we were going to have the most affordable, and we have free senior programs. That doesn't happen in any other city. People come here.
Right.
So with this, in some ways, what gets me to want to learn more and assess this more carefully is that we free up the money that we would be subsidizing things that are, I forget the term, the choice services, in order to be able to subsidize things that are in keeping with what Fairfax is. So I think knowing this is critical to being able to maintain that level of support.
Can I just ask one question? Did anybody else want to comment during the public hearing? No, I think that was important. Seeing none, I would like to close the public hearing, and I'd like to ask for council deliberations, further questions, potentially a motion. John, go ahead.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, the level of detail here is, well, it's eye-opening. I wouldn't say it's mind-numbing because it's actually quite stimulating. I mean, just seeing how much it costs to actually do some of these things, and, it makes me question, well, why is it costing so much to do these things? And that's another thing that, we could possibly look at. But that's not part of this exercise right here. It's like, okay, what does it take to get these things done? And that's what these reflected costs are here. And, we have made decisions, for instance, a couple of years ago when we were deciding to create the amnesty program for second units, basically to try to encourage people to legalize the second units that they have, so that, there's, they can for their benefit, then when they go to sell their property,
So
then
those
they
are
can legally have them.
50%
yeah.
off for 10 years,
Yeah.
and we did that for all ADUs and JADUs.
Correct.
So
yeah.
it was part of the amnesty, but we included it for all. So that was a deliberate decision we made so
That's
we could do more.
Yeah, it's a deliberate, I wouldn't necessarily call it a political decision. It's more of a decision that we decide as a policy because we want to encourage people to create affordable housing, and we want to have the housing that's there to come in from the cold and be counted towards our RENA numbers, and that helps the town too in being required to put in less by the state or the region. And, and then things like the recreational programs, obviously, yeah, I mean, I'm not really into subsidizing somebody's hillside, ridgeline corridor fees, because that's not actually something we want to encourage. But those are definitely if somebody wants to put that application in to try to get a variance or something like that. Those are real costs that take staff time, and so that's reflected here that way. But it's admirable how much work has gone into here, page by page and line by line. And I think it's right to bring it back for a couple of cracks at it, because it is kind of mind-boggling. It's got a lot of details in it, but I support a lot of the things that you've done here.
Okay, would somebody else like to comment? Bruce?
So I wanted to thank the committee for working on it. That clearly was an enormous amount of work and a very interesting study methodology. I was asking Garrett earlier what the methodology was, and I got a little clearer as you spoke. So you've actually tied it all together as a model, so you can basically say what each of the staff members, how they're spending their time, and that all adds up to what services they're providing. So that is an admirable exercise, quite a detailed one, and I hope an exercise that benefits staff going forward in terms of just managing how we do things, understanding where the time goes. And there are some things that we have done and are in the process of doing to try to minimize the requirement for some of these fees to even be paid in the first place, like changing some of our zoning regulations so that we don't automatically trigger a use permit requirement when things happen that don't really need that level of detail, because indeed it's very costly by the time everybody goes through all the steps they need to go through to process a use permit. Even if it was the most straightforward thing in the world, once it's done, it still took that many hours to go through it, and that costs. So I agree with, I partially understand what you were saying as you gave your presentation, that your goal, and it's stated in the staff report, your goal philosophically, I guess, would be to get the fees to completely recover the cost of the services. What's before us now clearly doesn't do that. It gets to a higher level of recovery than we have been at recently after the years of not increasing our fees, but not to 100%. And a lot has been spoken this evening about reasons why we wouldn't do that, one of which is to not discourage people from coming forward and doing things that applying for the permits that they need to. So that's certainly important. It's kind of I don't completely agree that would be the goal if we could afford to do it, because there's kind of a public safety reason. There's sort of what is I would draw an analogy, I guess, to the police. The traffic enforcement, for example. No one wants to be the subject of traffic enforcement. Nobody's going to be happy if they get pulled over and written a ticket. But on the other hand, all of us as a whole, as a community, really appreciate what the police do to keep the town safe. And that involves enforcement.
And so there's sort of the two sides of this. And so that analogy can somewhat play to, for example, the building department, which as an individual person who wants to do some building, you might not feel like you really want to have to go pay the fees to get the permit. But on the other hand, as a town as a whole, we really appreciate the fact that our town is developing in an orderly way and a safe way, and that where our buildings are built according to the current codes and are safe and work well together. So that those two sides of the thing are, there's the public side and there's the individual side. Even though the fee itself is for something that an individual decided to do, the public has decided that we want a public role in that individual doing that. We want some oversight. So that's sort of why this whole system is in place, why there are permits and fees for a lot of things that individuals decide to do. In general, I think this is, I certainly can't say I've studied every line of this and thought it all through and tried to follow in the footsteps of the subcommittee, but I think that overall it looks good. I am comfortable with what I've seen so far in the direction of it, and I appreciate the work that's been done on it.
Thank you, Bruce. Peter, I assume you want to speak a little bit?
Yeah, you know, I really appreciate all the work that's gone into this. And Renee and Barbara, thanks, and Garrett for plowing through kind of the nuts and bolts of what the town does in terms of permits and so forth. If there's not any urgency, I actually wouldn't mind bringing it back next month. I wouldn't mind going through and looking more in depth. I would feel better in terms of doing my due diligence.
Why don't you make a motion to go ahead and continue it, because I think I kind of heard that. And I don't think there's really any opposition to that.
Yeah, so I would just
concept.
move that we continue it to next month. And I think by then I'll have a chance to have, really gone through. And if there's anything that, catches my attention, I could bring it up, and I'm sure everyone else
Just a
could
question of staff. I think Garrett wanted to mention something. Would we do another public hearing, or would we say we've done the public hearing and instead just take public comment?
It's either way. It's probably, you could continue the public hearing. Either way is fine. I just wanted to point out, we weren't planning to have Chu attend the next
No,
meeting
I
unless you
think-
wanted him to.
I think that's fine.
Yeah, I don't think we would need to, unless you want to come back to, if you haven't tried the sake
David.
bar and sushi, it's excellent.
Okay.
Okay,
No,
no.
I would like to recommend that we would bring it back and just continue the public hearing, only in that this, I take what Stephanie out there said, that we have no idea the appetite of the community around these things, and now at least there's been the opportunity, should they have chosen to tune in or to look at the agenda, to take a look, knowing that it's coming back and that they have a month to review, and also for ourselves, for due diligence.
Okay, so why don't we
Make a motion to continue till next month?
continue the public hearing?
Continue the public hearing till next month.
And I'll second that.
So that
No, you
was,
got
that was Goddard, second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Seeing none, that motion carries.
And
Thank
can I-
you.
Just a procedural point, Hannah, will the revised attachment B that we have at the dais, is that on our website?
Yes, it was added this afternoon.
Okay, so everyone watching at home, take a look at
I
that.
would suggest that perhaps when we put this on the agenda for next month, we have one package, not all these revisions with it. Can
Right.
we-
I anticipate, in fact, I know that there are some adjustments that need to be done in some of the different sheets and more clarification. So what will happen is you'll get a regular staff report with attachments that would be the most current attachments, maybe even different from the ones you received. And in terms of the presentation, the one thing we didn't go over is we actually had a PowerPoint that just put up the current fees versus the proposed fees, and then staff was just going to point out, that'd be an opportunity to point out a couple of fees if you wanted some adjustment to add questions. And to answer one question, we would point out that for use permits, which is the most common planning planning permit, that the increase went from 815 to 915, and then 10% a year. So you can actually see how we were trying to be a little more reasonable going forth. And one of the other questions I think we didn't answer is typically a best practice, and Chu can correct me, is most cities, towns would look at updating or taking a look at their fees every 5 years if possible, because you just don't want to wait that long. Obviously, we didn't do that, and part of it, we've talked about it, we just didn't get around to doing it. And as you know, this has taken a year just to get to this point, and part of that is because we didn't update it in year 5. We're almost starting over as to how much staff time. And part of it, ultimately, another policy decision in the future will be if you change what you require a use permit for, then all these will change because it's a different level of work required for administrative, less hours, so on. But that being said, that's for a future meeting, but we'll bring it back in November and you'll have a whole set of new materials to look at that hopefully is pretty close. We'll be very close to this. There'll be a couple of tweaks here and there.
Okay, well,
And may I make a suggestion, just see whether people agree with this? Just the biggest part of this packet was the cost of services study, which won't change. It's now complete. So maybe, even though you probably put that on the online packet for the benefit of the public next time, maybe you don't need to print this again for us. We can all hold on to this
yeah,
part.
I actually,
Get new ones, all the
Excellent,
others,
yeah.
but just the study itself.
The only thing that I would recommend is that we did attach supplements for some pages that had copying issues, so just make sure that you replace those.
Yeah.
why don't,
Great.
I think for us, we don't need that, but for the public packet, we need to reproduce it.
Okay.
Okay, and for what goes in the library, let's make sure that we have like one good copy that's on the website. Okay, so thank you, everyone. Let's move on to a report on Hickory Road, and I want to point out that we have a supplement that's just a little bit long. Thank you very much, Chu. Have a good trip back. Appreciate your work. So, Garrett, we have supplement to agenda item 18, which makes it a slight bit longer. So can you just do the staff report?
Okay, so we're reporting back in Hickory Road. You recall at your September 4th meeting, you considered the petition from residents in Hickory regarding the road improvements, asked us to take a look and report back where we're at. So pretty much where we're at is Public Works crews started the pothole repair on Hickory. Part of it was they have to prep pothole and then get the material to fill it, which is in essence hot mix. They were going to go, it was at least a 2-day job. The second day they actually didn't get back around to it. Part of the problem is we just had the one staff member who has a Class C license in order to drive the truck actually turned out to be unavailable for other reasons to perform that work. And so we were unable to get the hot mix. And then when we were able to get the hot mix, the asphalt company indicated that they needed to make more of the 3/8 aggregate, which is what you need for pothole repair. And so, long story short, we're hoping next week to complete that work by Public Works in terms of scheduling and getting the asphalt. Some of the other things we did is we actually had our contractual project manager reach out to the neighborhood's representatives. He's actually meeting with them tomorrow on site. I'm actually not sure if the town engineer will be there, but that's also on the list. And one of the last things is we were exploring other alternatives.
When you say on the list, you mean meeting with them to hear
Yes,
one-on-one?
I'm not sure if the town engineer will be there, but we also have plans if he needs to. He can come back out at a separate time and meet with the neighbors or the
Okay.
residents' representatives.
Sorry for interrupting.
The other thing is we are looking at some alternatives for Hickory Road, one of which is rubberized asphalt. Seems like a product that could work really well on that road. The problem, not the problem, but the challenge is there are minimum quantities of the materials you have to order. In essence, the asphalt plant that makes the material, they have to change out their product line, and for a whole day, they generate this material because they just can't generate a little. So you have to commit to use 1 day's worth, which is roughly 10,000 square yards, which would be the equivalent of 4 or 5 hickories lengthwise. So what we need to do is, before we could even go down that path, we need to explore what the other roads that would be good candidates, obviously come and get council approval, And depending on what's being done, if that's considered a public works project, we actually need to bid it out. This material can only be done in certain temperatures. So depending, most likely it wouldn't be able to be done till spring, depending on the different dynamics. There's a state grant program that offsets maybe $1 a square yard, but the minimum of that is 40,000 square yards. And so if you did that, that would probably be the equivalent of like 1/6 of all your roads in town or something like that. So you would clearly need to identify overall strategy, how you want to do that, and that would need to be bid out unless it was maintenance. So these are all the issues we're trying to figure out, but we think we have a solution for Hickory in the long run.
Question.
Go ahead, Renee.
Are we talking about patching material, or are we talking about rolling something out on top of the roads?
Yeah, in essence, this rubberized asphalt is pretty much the same technique in essence. It doesn't have to be as thick. So rather than being 3 or 4 inches of asphalt, maybe you can get by with a 1.5, 2 inches, and you lay it down similar to the process. It kind of fills in and binds into the alligator cracks and so on. My understanding, it works pretty well. Our contractual project manager used it a lot in Morgan Hill. Seems to work great. Your only problem is, one is you need a certain amount of quantities, 2, you need the right temperature, and 3, people need to stay off the road for longer than you would with asphalt. Asphalt, you can almost go on pretty much after it's laid down. Here, you wouldn't be able to.
What are we talking about cost, approximate?
Isn't it about 1/3 of the normal cost?
Yeah, that's what we're looking at. We're thinking it could be significantly less. I mean, one estimate we saw was, somewhere between 1/8 to 1/10 the cost of asphalt, the typical asphalt that we do for a project. So that's why we still have a lot of work to be done in figuring out what to do. But more importantly, ultimately, whatever we do, the council is going to have to weigh in on the different roads and the techniques.
Just so, I think originally when you and I talked about this, we talked about it kind of doing it as a pilot to see how well it worked, right? And I think one option to consider in the future as we explore this is consider maybe San Anselmo might be interested. So we might be able to do, a partnership with that town. I don't know if that's doable, but a partnership where we get the 10,000, is it square yards or cubic yards?
I think it's 10,000 square yards.
No, it's square yards. It's not cubic yards. So maybe that's one way to do it, because we wanted to really try this out and see how well it worked before we went full speed ahead, correct?
That's correct. I'm not sure how public bidding would work that way, but we could figure that out. I think we still have a lot of work to do. That's a good idea. We'll take a look at that.
But I guess what I'm confused about is that we're talking about road material, but the biggest issue that we're dealing with on Hickory is needing it to be re-engineered and looking at.
Actually, this product, in essence, what you would do is you would put it down the road, just like you would asphalt. You don't need to reconstruct it per se. We think that's a possible solution. You might have to reconstruct parts of it, but not the whole thing. It's my understanding. But that's why it's something that we need to take our time to explore to see if this would work. In the pictures I've seen of it in other communities, it looks great. It's lasted for 10 years. So, but that being said, it's something that's very promising. It's just a lot more work to be done to answer those questions.
But in the meantime, we're patching. We're hot patching.
Yes, we're using hot mix 3/8 aggregate.
Okay.
And presumably next week, I'll be able to get the asphalt and the crew to perform the work.
Thank you.
John had a question or a comment.
Yeah, I mean, I really want to encourage the way this is going. I've also looked into this material also. I got on their email list years ago, and so
great.
They send out a lot of emails because they're trying to sell this. It is it's a new approach to it, and that price point is incredible. I mean, there's got to be a downside, and I'm wondering where the downside is, and it could be that the downside is getting an asphalt plant to stop everything they're doing and then make this other stuff. But this, they deal with situations where the road breaks up a lot, which is something that we've got in Fairfax a lot. I mean, that we found up on Frustick, I guess it was. They just put the asphalt down on the dirt with no underlayment, and it lasted for a while, but, it fell apart. And now we know why. I would like, to explore this further, and it could be that in getting people to do some collaborative effort with, say, Fairfax and San Anselmo, each trying it out on a couple of streets. It may be the mobilization of the contractor, that they're far enough apart so that that would be difficult to do. I don't know, but that's a question for the contractor.
Well, and that's why we want to take time and explore
to take our time and explore it. But, and I think it also brings up, okay, which streets are going to get this, the test or whatever.
Why don't
and
we
what I
hold
would
that?
suggest
Yes.
is right now we have a PCI index, which, is a pavement condition index just for the, whatever the initial challenge, or the people that haven't heard it all the time. But we have that basically takes into account the overall condition of the pavement on an average stretch. It may well be, I know in particular the stretch of scenic that I'm on, it has some really good sections and it has some really abysmal sections, and that all gets averaged out to a certain number. It could be that we could do a more granular approach to evaluate different sections that were better or worse condition.
I think we're going to be
and
doing
also
another.
take.
Aren't we
Please,
going
please,
to be doing
Barbara, I've got a
another-
couple more.
Just wanted to
things
say
here.
one thing. I think we're going to be doing a pavement management plan again in the spring, so it might be timely.
That could be timely, to do that. But the other factors that I would like to also get into the same matrix as the PCI index that we've been using is the slope of the street, because steep streets like Hickory, there's compounding problems, with water going around and stuff like that. And the other one is how much use the street gets, because, we've got some streets that get very little use because they don't connect to a whole lot. Hickory's one example. It's in terrible shape, but one of the reasons why it's been skipped by for so many decades is because, it serves 23 houses or whatever it is, as opposed to a street that serves 450 houses. It would be very interesting to find out how this material also holds up on something like Sir Francis Drake, which is really getting a big beating. And, you sure that the new pavement on Whites Hill Pass looks pretty good, and especially makes our section of Sir Francis Drake look pretty bad, at least parts of it.
Is that rubberized asphalt, the new stuff that they're laying down?
I don't know.
Well, I would love to add live oak and maple to the list, because it's in really bad shape. It's a steep.
Well, yeah,
street.
it's really steep, and as
a
a
lot of
result,
traffic.
people really, there's a lot of torque on the tires, and it pushes that gravel out of the potholes quickly. So that's why I think it should be part of the matrix with the PCI.
All right.
The slope and the use.
I think we've kind of beat this one a little bit to death. Could we have public comment on this? Richard, would you like to speak on this topic?
Obviously, I don't live on Hickory, and I don't see anyone from Hickory here today. I don't know why they're not here. The thing that struck me when I heard all the residents last time was that they were talking about all the water and how there were some crazy water conditions there in a former creek and whatever. And so I don't have any issue about exploring new materials that are promising and cheaper and all of that, and all the strategies and how to pay for it and join with other towns. All that sounds great. It just strikes me that they would probably, I'm thinking that residents there would like to still have some kind of engineering analysis about the water thing, which they said was going to continue to keep their problem happening over the years. So I didn't hear that exactly clearly spoken to or whatever. So in lieu of no Hickory people here, I'm jumping in to throw that out there.
Okay, well, thank you, Richard. Anyone else like to comment on this topic? Seeing none, bringing it back. So I think we're basically just accepting the report, and it's next week that the staff will be out to do the hot mix. And if for some reason that staff person isn't available, can we just get a contractor to do it?
Our next option would be, we see if San Anselmo could help us, and then the next would be a contractor. Originally, we were going to talk to a contractor to combine it with other projects, but it just gets like 5 times as expensive.
Okay, well, let's see, just because I know that there was some work done, and it actually is a little worse now because it didn't happen the second day. So if we can move that along, that would be great.
Yeah, and
And then-
just quick, I'm sorry.
To Richard's point, I mean, yeah, I went up there, and it basically, it's a creek in disguised as a street. I mean, it's a water course. Have you looked into, the feasibility of doing any kind of, I don't know, more extensive public works or engineering, or I don't know what it would take, but there's going to be a lot of water coursing pretty quickly down that, as long as it continues to rain.
So our engineers will take a look at that, but I think what I pointed out last week, water and drainage are very tricky issues. How water should drain 40 years ago and how it's been draining for the last 20 years, what that means is if you redirect it by doing something and it goes somewhere else, where it goes usually somewhere else is where it causes a problem somewhere else, and perhaps those people or property owners, they sometimes have issues related to that. So it's a very tricky thing that we take a look at. I get it for keeping the scour on the hillside or whatever, but it's something that we take a look at on every project and try to be very, very aware of the course of drainage and trying not to redirect it too much from where it's used to going. It's kind of a tricky issue.
Okay, is it acceptable to move on to the next item? I think we've got someone here waiting to speak on
I just
that.
had a quick last thing
Okay.
about this. I think this was established at the last meeting, but do we have a contact, someone who's sort of leading up the Hickory group, so that, to Richard's point, that they're not here, perhaps they need to be updated or just sort of officially updated?
They've assigned 2 residents to be their liaisons. Maybe there's 3, and actually our contractual project manager is meeting with them tomorrow morning.
Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so let's move on to item 19, which is the second reading and adoption of an ordinance adding Chapter 8.72 to Title 8 of the Fairfax Municipal Code, regulating single-use foodware to require businesses to use compostable or reusable materials for takeout food, CEQA exempt, etc. So Garrett, would you like to do the staff report?
Sure. As you may recall, on September 4th, you first introduced the ordinance, and tonight's the second reading and adoption. And if you do adopt it, then it would take effect, in this case, July 1, 2020. Basically, what the ordinance does, it prohibits food vendors from providing non-compostable, single-use food serviceware in preparation to let the food vendors and impacted businesses know. We did send a letter out with the notice, with the ordinance attached to them, letting them know of the second reading. But I don't know, did we hear back from anyone, Hannah? I forgot to ask you.
We did not.
Okay, so we haven't heard back. It doesn't mean that they're not interested, it just means that we haven't heard back. But in essence, as we had previously discussed, if it takes effect July 1, 2020, that gives them roughly 10 months or so to get prep for the ordinance. I think a part of this, what we had talked about, is the town using our grant, retaining some professional services to help with education and outreach to the businesses. One of the things that came up since we actually introduced the ordinance is the county informed me that they are working to prepare a model ordinance with single-use plastics that they're hoping will be adopted by all Marin communities. And if a similar ordinance is adopted by everyone, the county has indicated they would undertake the enforcement mechanism. I believe Environmental Health Services would take the lead since they're already working with a lot of these businesses. In terms of enforcement, county also indicated perhaps there could be some technical assistance provided if everyone's on the same page. The only reason for bringing that up is perhaps in the future, you may want to tweak the ordinance if the county ordinance is slightly different, just to make them similar, and then you can gain that economies of scale with the county enforcing it. So we're not saying don't do something now, it's just keep that in the back of your mind for if a model ordinance is adopted countywide. But that concludes the staff report.
Okay, any questions of staff?
Yes, if I may, Mayor.
Go ahead.
I'm intrigued by the idea that the county would kind of come in and take over the enforcement. How would that work? We would just adopt the county ordinance to supersede, to replace our
I think we'd probably just amend it.
chapter 8.72 at that time?
I think you would just make the appropriate amendment, whatever those are. I have no idea. I've never even, I don't think we've seen their model ordinance, so we don't know how it compares. It could actually be the same for all we know.
Yeah, hopefully they'd use us as a model. Yeah.
Well, we'll see what happens, because San Anselmo's finished, as we all know, and will be the second. Sausalito has some kind of version of it that isn't quite as stringent as ours, and the county is in very early process in terms of creating an ordinance. They need to do a much larger study of the different types of businesses, and I would really like to strongly recommend that we move forward with the second reading and that we leave it as that it to be amended, should it be that we can make use of those enforcement resources, and also perhaps some kind of technical assistance.
And just so you know, that's just real preliminary,
Right.
what I reported out, so it doesn't mean anything is set in stone.
And we also know it could take them quite a long time, as Renee mentioned.
Exactly.
I have one question. When we sent out the mailing to all these businesses and food vendors, did we include the pictures? I think we should have, and I believe I asked for that, because the problem is there are so many things that say compostable, but they aren't compostable at Redwood landfill, and so I think the ordinance doesn't make it very clear, and I think it would have helped people who got that notification that, don't just decide to start ordering things, because you have to be more careful about that. So I wish we would have done that, and I thought I asked that last time.
May I respond to that?
Sure.
I think at this point that those pictures were starting to cause a lot of confusion for people. I was watching people and speaking with Janice Reynolds, who's helping with that outreach in San Anselmo, and people can't decipher those. I would propose, and I've got an idea for creating a whole new type of visual for businesses to actually be able to use, that's a lot more clearly depicted, and also something that's run by Redwood Landfill, so that we can get really clear. I mean, they're going to need to give us a lot more guidance, because slowly we're all going to have ordinances.
Why don't we
So I
ask-
didn't want to send that out right now and confuse people with pictures
Well, why
and
don't we
questions.
ask Redwood Landfill to make the thing?
Well,
Since they're the ones who are confusing everybody.
we do have a subcommittee and a group that's going to have a sit down with some
Great.
of the players to
Okay,
figure that out.
So I'd like to open it up to public comment, and I believe we have two people here who might want to comment. Chance, I believe you're ready to step up.
He just wants to hear
I was actually here just to see how it was going, but thanks for, I feel called out now. I'm just kidding.
Sorry, Chance, I didn't mean to.
Good evening. As you know, my name is Chance Catrano. I'm a resident here in Fairfax, your friendly neighborhood environmentalist. And also on the Sierra Club's XCOM executive committee here in Marin County. As I mentioned during the first reading, we've been actively engaging with communities and some of the zero waste gurus in the county. So we're really excited that this has come to the second reading and that you all are taking leadership on behalf of the 5,500 members of the Sierra Club here in Marin. Just thank you and encourage you to swiftly pass this, and so we can figure out how to start engaging with our food vendors and making sure that this happens as like this amazing model for how we can approach this statewide. So thank you again.
Thank you, Chance. Anybody else like to speak on this topic? Seeing none, I'd like to bring it back. Would somebody like to potentially make a motion?
So I
Please.
will.
Oh, no, let me make it.
Could we let Renee do
all
this
right.
one?
But can I just make a comment?
Absolutely.
Or a
Do you want to
thanks?
make a comment?
So in terms of I totally support this. I'm glad we're going to do the second reading tonight, looks like. I assume that's what your motion's going to be. And thank you for the work, and I definitely heartily support the idea of taking a good look at those graphics, because they were confusing to me. And the whole issue is confusing to start with, and actually kind of intentionally confusing, because there are companies out there that stamp the little chasing arrows all over everything they build, and it doesn't mean a damn thing. So we really need to sort this out. And as you say, it's a moving target. So I think some real good attention with the partnership of Marin Sanitary, Redwood Landfill, and other people who know a great deal about this to come up with graphics or a website or something interactive, something that's, I think, a web page that would be
He's not here.
updated so that it's always accurate. You can always look to it and see what the current state of the art is. It would be a really helpful thing.
Okay, thank you,
Thank you.
Bruce. I think I just want to mention that a lot of these items that say compostable are certified ANSI or BPI, so it's not just somebody just putting that on there. ANSI is kind of a standard, and it may just be that they're not compostable at Redwood Landfill. But Renee, please make that motion.
Okay, I would like to make a motion to read by title only and adopt an ordinance entitled An Ordinance of the Town Council of the Town of Fairfax, adding Chapter 8.72 to Title 8 of the Fairfax Municipal Code, regulating single-use foodware. I'm going to have to combine it with
That's all
here.
you need to do.
That's all I need? Okay, I thought I
And
needed more
then-
numbers.
And
Second.
Okay,
so that
Second.
was Vice Mayor Goddard first, second Reed. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Seeing none, that measure passes unanimously. Thank you. Deputy Town Clerk, I just want to point out that thank you, John Reed pointed out to me that the applicant for the tree committee, I hope everything's all right with him. So if you can check in with him and see if we can schedule him for the November meeting before. But before we wrap it up, guys, we do have council reports and comments, and we do have that item in our packet. So there's no need to add anything unless anybody wants to. But feel free not to want to, so we can move on. And I would add, John, did you have something?
Okay, I'll be brief. But in addition to the Transportation Authority meeting, there was also a joint meeting between the Marin Transit as well as the Transportation Authority of Marin. And basically we were giving feedback and talking to this, it's basically it's a group that's kind of business driven, but it's looking at long-term commutes and trying to reduce commutes, and what they're proposing is to put something on a tax measure on the ballot.
Another one.
Yes, yet another tax measure on the ballot. And so I thought, that might get people's attention to say that. And but it is their acronym is FASTER, and basically they're looking at reducing commute times. And I was trying to encourage them to look at the synergy between public transportation and first and last mile is necessary, and bicycle use and electric bikes are exploding in their use, and they're actually they're showing up like crazy on the SMART train, for instance. Way more than capacity, maybe more than capacity on ferries, way more than capacity on the various buses, and so they really need to accommodate this. And I think that's a way to get people out of cars, or at least it's one way. Anyway, I made that case strongly, and it didn't get printed in the paper, but I thought I'd mention that.
Thank you, John, for taking that leadership role. I just want to add one thing that was on my report, but I've been meeting with the Department of Toxic Substances Control to try to move that cleanup site along across from Good Earth, and I think through some efforts of David Smadback, myself, and working with the owners of Fair Anselm. I think we will be moving that thing along. And town managers report, sit down, because you have to give an update on the sidewalks and where we are on that.
So sidewalks.
Come on, let's get them done.
Sidewalks, it looks like in talking to Van Mitty, it's the end of October. The caveat we gave is whatever he does just has to be done before the parade, and then he can go gangbusters in November, and it has to get all done before Thanksgiving. Not before the parade, Halloween parade.
Halloween parade.
Halloween
So let me ask you one question. So one of the concerns was that, are we going to be doing this while people are holiday shopping?
No, December, after Thanksgiving, no work will be done.
But a lot of people do shop in November too, so are we going to try to do, we're only doing repairs.
Well, to do curb ramp, things like that, it's a little more extensive. But the reality is before Thanksgiving, we can actually get quite a bit done.
Okay, and are we going to do Bolinas along Broadway?
We're focusing all the effort right now on Bolinas. Most likely the others, the most complicated one, and we're still talking about
Sir Francis Drake.
Sir Francis Drake and Taylor because of the storm drain. And so that one's probably going to be put off until next year.
I hate to say this because I know how badly we want to get them done, but having worked a lot with those downtown businesses while these things are going on, they asked for no November. I mean, that is when they don't just start shopping right after Thanksgiving. After mid-November, I would like to request that we
get done
don't
before
tear up the
November
sidewalks.
15th.
Well, why don't we do this?
Okay.
We're going to meet with the chamber on Monday. Let's talk to them too.
Okay.
Yeah, it's Monday.
Oh, I'll have a representative there
Okay.
to attend.
Yeah, I think it's Monday, so I'm pretty sure it's Monday. But could you send out a little written thing on this? Because David Smadbeck had put it in his newsletter for September, and he's asked me about it, and I asked him to make sure we get clarification from you. Let's get a little written email to the chamber on this.
Sure, we could do that. I did talk to him at the Spirit of Marin.
But it would be good for more than just talking at the Spirit of Marin.
And I wanted to just report that this morning, starting at the police station, fire station, with the trusted leadership of our police and fire personnel, we led over 100 children and parents down the street and down the middle of Sir Francis Drake with the chief guiding us along, and it was absolutely festive, and car drivers were happy.
Safe routes to school?
Well, this is International Walk and Roll to School Day. So all over the world, people were walking and biking to school, and it was a great success and a great welcome for the kids at Manor, and the schools are doing an excellent job.
Thank you. So, Town Manager, do you have more to add to your report?
No, but you might want to ask the town attorney if she has anything.
Does the town attorney want to add something? Okay. Thank you. And so let's move to adjournment in memory of Hal Lazzini, who was a longtime Fairfaxian. And with that, oh my God, it's 10:10. 10:12.
Okay, maybe we should end the meeting
we are
before we chat
adjourned.
about this.